A warmer for the low. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. We've got a great podcast for you guys. Joining me in segment number 2, we've got aboard Mike Cutri. He does great work over at FTN Bets. He's going to be joining me, and we're going to be taking a look at what we've all been getting out of some of these non-conference tournaments, how he does gauge some of those, and how he's also just, in general, gauging teams on a neutral court. And he's also going to be talking about riding hot hands and banking on variance, as well as he's a former D3 hooper himself, so he's able to give a little bit of a player's perspective when you're hot from 3, when you're cold from 3, and how he utilizes that with his betting, along with a few games for Monday. And then in the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Monday, as we hit some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at unit_D1. Keep in mind, letters CM, name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire on whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Do not get in any Twitter/X questions today, but a very complete day of basketball on Sunday. Let's take a look back at it, try to find some trends and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
It's a 4-1 start for Wyoming in a body clock game. It was an 8:30 a.m. local time tip. They got it done against Furman by a count of 78-71. That started out the day with the Wyoming Cowboys going 12 of 25 from three-point range. Sam Griffin is able to put in their 26 points. You get 13 points, 13 boards, and 4 blocks out of Caden Boom Boom Powell as well. And for Furman, just 8 of 34 from three-point range. Managed to hold in there as they won the rebound battle, and they did a nice job of keeping Wyoming off the free throw line. They went 10 of 12 at the charity stripe, and J.P. Biggs, he tried his best, took 21 shots, had 22 points, but Furman, they fall in this one, and Wyoming got the job done. Got to get the job done with my DK Network Grade picks. I apologize for the last few being bad. We're still 10-5 for the season, but had the under in San Diego State versus Washington. Well, when this game went to overtime, you knew that there was not a lot of hope for that, as the under was already gone. But man, this was one that was not a great call. San Diego State, by the way, last year, they played very up-tempo in the non-conference last year as well, and it feels like they're doing the same again. 197, they were able to get the win in overtime over Washington. Just doesn't feel like a winning formula right now for San Diego State. They did have Jaden Ledee absolutely go off. 34 points, 17 rebounds for San Diego State. They go 9 of 22 from three-point range. And for Washington, they had every one of their starters going to double figures as well, including Xavier Wheeler with 19.6 assists, and Paul Mulcahy. How about 11 points and 13 assists for him as well? But Xavier Wheeler did have 4 turnovers, and for Washington, they lost the turnover battle 13-8. That turned out to be the difference in the game, especially with them shooting uncharacteristically well at the free throw line. 18 of 21. They had been very brutal coming into the game. So turnovers, a little bit costly there. Houston, well, it's just costly to fade this team in general. 69-55. They get it done against Dayton. For Dayton, Deron Holmes was able to chip in their 16 points, but just not a lot doing on this very stout Houston defense. Houston wins the rebound battle 38-28. Houston just 7 turnovers in this game, with Jamal Shedd being oh so efficient. 6 boards, 4 assists, pair of steals, 16 points. LJ Cryer, 4 of 8 from 3 with 18 points. Houston 6-0, absolutely crushing it once again. So they were able to get that in there. You were able to get a lot of power conference teams laying big numbers in as well. Illinois over Southern 88-60 was one of them, as Illinois was laying 24.5 in this one. Did have Tayron Joseph be able to supply for Southern 16 points, but for Illinois, even though they go just 5 of 22 from three-point range, they just absolutely decimated Southern on the glass. How about winning the rebound battle 50-17, as you had Quincy Guerrier give you 6 rebounds, Marcus Domas chips in their 9. You were able to have Luke Goody chip in their 7 boards, Amani Hansberry has 7 boards, so just death by a million rebounds for Illinois. You also saw a nice win and cover for Michigan State, 81-49. They completely take it to Alcorn State. Alcorn State in this one, 16 of 61 from the floor. Michigan State, they were very good with their three-point shooting a season ago. They start out cold. They go 10 of 25 in this one, with Trey Holloman, the sophomore, going 5 of 5 from distance, 17 points. and it feels like this Michigan State team is starting to give Xavier Booker a few more minutes. Looks solid out there, 5 points, 5 boards in 19 minutes, so gotta like what you're seeing out of Michigan State on that front. This was a team that laid a big number that did not get it done, though. Missouri, as a favorite of 22.5 points, loses outright to Jackson State, 73-72. And Missouri didn't even shoot it bad from three. They were 11 of 29 from distance. Nick Honor chips in their 17 points. Caleb Grill, 15 points, 7 rebounds. But for Jackson State, what did it for them was winning the turnover battle, 18-13. Jackson State also had Kevin Evans Jr. step up with 22 points. He goes 3 of 6 from three-point range. So good old Jackson State able to get it done, but another one of those big favorites that came through, Arizona, 101-56, and this was a mollywhopping in the second half, as this was a game at the half. I mean, for Arizona, they were up 43-37 at halftime. You actually had UT Arlington, I think at one point had this game tied up with about $1:30 remaining in the first half, and then Arizona in the second half outscored UT Arlington 58-19, as for Arizona, they go 11 of 24 from three-point range. Keelan Boswell was able to give you 15 points, and for UT Arlington, 18 turnovers. You had 19 points out of Shamar Wilson, and everyone else just really could not do their part. Doing their part, though, Liberty keeping things slow and controlled, 71-61. They take the Myrtle Beach title. They were able to cover the 5.5-point spread, as even without Darius McGee, this team is just a really good system in general. Keenan Menifee, the transfer from Bowling Green, chips in there 13 points, 7 assists, goes 3 of 6 from three-point range, and your main scorer on this day, as for Liberty, on any given day, it could be any one of their starters. It was Zach Cleveland, 21 points, 9 rebounds, and for Vermont, 8 of 28 from three-point range. Recognize that they won a few games at the Myrtle Beach Invitational. Still have a few question marks with them, and I certainly still have my question marks with St. John's, but they get it done against Utah, 91-82, as for Utah, they go 11 of 25 from three. Unfortunately for them, St. John's, they went 13 of 26 from the outside. Joel Soriano, 12 points, 15 rebounds. You get 19 points, 8 assists out of Dennis Jenkins. Jordan Dingle, he did have 6 turnovers, but he also had 18 points. And for Utah, they were able to do a solid job on the turnover battle, 16-12. But for St. John's, they won the rebound battle, 42-32. Much needed win for the Johnnies. And in the state of Arizona, Grand Canyon falls to South Carolina. All of a sudden, South Carolina's 5-0 with wins over Virginia Tech and Grand Canyon. I can't even count DePaul. DePaul lost by double figures against San Francisco. Just a sad program in general, but for South Carolina, 7 of 17 from three-point range. You had 27 big points from B.J. Mack Truck, and for Grand Canyon, their three-point shooting, not quite what it was a season ago. I think it'll rebound, and Ty Grant Foster, another solid day out of him. He was able to supply 16 points, and for Grand Canyon, they win the rebound battle 30-23, but they lost the turnover battle 13-10, and just could not keep up with South Carolina's three-point shooting, as they were able to be white hot from distance. Another team that was white hot, Virginia Tech. They take it to Wofford by a count of 98-76, as there was just a big giant run in the second half where Virginia Tech had something like a 14-0 run going on, and they were able to pull away, as Wofford actually shoots 13 of 31 from three-point range. Virginia Tech, though, 10 of 20 from distance. Virginia Tech overall shot 57% from the floor, winning the turnover battle 15-11, and they were able to pull in their 36 boards compared to Wofford's 28, as Lynn Kidd, he has spent a lot of time on the bench in his college basketball career. He's making the most out of the time he's getting right now. 20 points, 7 rebounds for Wofford. You were able to have Corey Tripp be able to chip in their 14 points, but much too little to get the job done and to be able to cover the spread. As for American, they cover the spread and they very nearly got the outright win. Georgetown weasels their way out in overtime against American by a count of 88-83, as American, it looked like they were going to be able to pull it off. They were up by a count of 65-55 with 4:01 remaining, but Jaden Epps, he was able to have himself a massive game. 6 of 13 from three-point range, 31 points. You get a double-double, 22 points, 11 boards out of Dontrez Styles. And for American, they went 9 of 27 from three, while Georgetown went 10 of 28 from the outside. American has always had their turnover woes as well. They had 14 of those. So Matt Rogers, 17 points, 9 rebounds. kept Americans snug, so Georgetown avoids losing their second game of the year to a Patriot League team, and this team avoided a complete and utter calamity as well, and that would be Texas. Texas has 17.5-point favorites. They need a last-second shot from Max Abmas to be able to get an 81-80 win over Louisville. Reason why Louisville was able to hold in this game is, for one, they were able to go 7 of 16 from three-point range, and Texas just 2 of 17 from distance. But additionally, Brendan Hundley-Hatfield was relatively solid in this game. He goes for 11 points, 9 rebounds, and then Sky Clark, Trey White, 20 points apiece out of them for Texas. You had Caden Shedrick on pretty much one arm be able to give you 27 points. He goes 11 of 15 from the floor, and though the three ball was not working for Texas, inside they went 29 of 50 on their 2-point attempts, go 17 of 23 at the free throw line. That allows them to be able to avoid what would have been a very, very costly loss, and this has been costly if you've been taking that. Yale unders, as for the second straight day, Yale under gets toasted in overtime, this time against Gardner-Webb, 71-70. Yale's able to get it done, as this was a closing total of 133.5. So the final bucket made in regulation pretty much cost you on the closing total. The opening total was a little bit higher, so do certainly feel for you if you had that one. But for Yale, they go 7 of 20 from three-point range. They were able to get just enough out of Baz Embeg. 18 points, 12 boards to be able to get this one in. And for Gardner-Webb, the defense is always so rock solid for this team, but the offense oftentimes leaves quite a bit of something to be desired. Julian Sawarmo was able to chip in there 17 points, and you did get 18 points out of Isaiah Richards as well, the transfer from Louisiana, but past those two guys, really nobody else for this Gardner-Webb team was able to step up, and you just had many more weapons for Yale in this one. Speaking of weapons, how about the weapons that Miami currently has? They take down Kansas State by a kind of 91-83. For Kansas State, they started 1 of 16 from 3, and they finished 4 of 28 from the outside. You did have Cam Carter go for 12 of 22 from the floor, 28 points, but Tyler Perry, he has just 10 points on his 13 attempts for Kansas State. They also were able to do a solid job on the glass by a count of 35-29, but they weren't able to do a solid job of guarding the three-point arc. As Nigel Pack, against his old team, he packed it in. 7 of 12 from three-point range, 28 points, as Miami overall goes 11 of 24 from 3. Another nice performance out of Wooga Poplar, 15 points, 6 rebounds. Miami getting on a little bit of a nice run, and also getting on a nice run. How about UConn? UConn has covered all but one of their non-conference games since the start of the 2022-23 season, and the opponent that they didn't cover against, you'd be surprised to know, that was actually Mississippi Valley State. That was a harebrained game last week where they were laying 44.5 points, but they win, they cover, and they dominate against Indiana by a kind of 77-67 for Indiana. They just look a little bit disjointed out there. 17 made buckets to 12 turnovers, and Indiana, who has Khalil Ware, Mackenzie Mbakpo, Malik Renew, they get blasted on the glass 44-22 as Tristan Newton did it all. 23 points, 11 boards, 6 assists. He was able to go 8 of 10 at the free throw line, getting to the charity stripe quite a bit. Donovan Clingan, Alex Caravan combined 20 points, 15 rebounds. Caravan made a pair of threes. Just utter domination at a masterclass from UConn, and also a masterclass, the North Texas defense. They take down Towson 65-39, as for Towson, they had more turnovers than made field goals, which that's always a bad sign. 14 made field goals, 21 turnovers, while the Mean Green, they were able to do a solid job with 19 points going by way of Aaron Scott. You also had a great performance as well out of Providence, 71-64 the final. There was fear of perhaps a few suspensions, and they came down, but even with a few guys out of the full Providence, they were able to do a nice job of maintaining, and they did a good job of being able to win the rebound battle, 39-29 as Seven Carter, 19 points, 5 assists, 11 rebounds, was able to lead the team, although Thomason was able to chip in there, 19 points as well for Georgia, but just not enough in this one. And I mean, it's been a big theme with the favorites being able to get the job done. And how about Clemson taking it to Boise State? 85-68 for Boise State, 7-23 from 3. 8 of 15 for Clemson, with Joe Girard being the guy that stepped up in this one. 23 big points out of him. PJ Hall, pretty pedestrian, 14 points, but team really didn't need him, and this team has also been impressive. Iowa State now 4-0 straight up, 4-0 against the spread, covering all numbers of at least 20, and they made Grambling look silly. 92-37 the final for Grambling. 14 made field goals, 21 turnovers. Grambling completely blasted on the glass, losing that battle 37-18 for Iowa State. You had off the bench a quality 14 points, 5 assists out of Demarion Watson. You were able to get the freshman whose name I'm trying to pronounce, Milan Momosilovic. He comes in, he was able to give the team 13 points. He went 2 of 4 from 3. Just utter domination from old Iowa State. And also another team that covered a big number, Cincinnati. They were laying about 12.5 against Northern Kentucky, 90-66 the final with Dan Skillings being able to chip in there, 25 big points. And Washington State, they were able to take it to Rhode Island out in the great state of Connecticut by a count of 78-57. As for Rhode Island, they look better than last year, but you tell that they're still a bit of a work in progress. Zeke Montgomery had 19 points, and really nobody else had anything. And for Washington State, their swan song in Pac-12, which might become the Pac-2 soon. They were able to do a very solid job controlling the battle on the glass, winning that 36-28. And for Washington State, just 5 turnovers in this game. So very efficient there, and we always look to keep things efficient on the podcast, and what has been very efficient is taking a look at all these trends of what we've got, and right now we've got favorites continue to be white hot in college basketball, hitting at 52% against the spread, 332, 306, and 8. Meanwhile, the overs, they're starting to dry up a little bit more. We are now at a point where the over rate is right around 51%, 325 overs, 314 unders. Thrown in there, we've had 7 pushes as well, so that has been drying up a little bit, and I expect this to be going northward. Home underdogs this far this season, 54, 57, and 1 against the spread. So that's what we're getting right now in college basketball, and that's what we all saw on Sunday. Now let's take a look at what we've got for Monday, how to handicap these neutral court non-conference tournaments, and so much more with Mike Cutri, who does great work over at FTM Bets. He joins me next right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now a part of the V Family Podcast.
Sports Betting Innovative Analytics has taken the guesswork and emotion out of sports betting to bring you an innovative and trustworthy resource to enhance your journey to becoming a winning player. With industry-leading money-back guarantee options backed by their sophisticated modeling, they want to introduce you to a system that's not widely seen or available to help you beat the bookmaker. Specializing in NBA, college basketball, and WNBA, your first week is always free. Get started at SBIA1.com today.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now a part of the V Family Podcast. It is great to be joined by this man, as Mike Cutri is doing great work over at Shot Quality Bets. He, much like myself, is formerly of the Division III ranks, and we Division III guys, we must stand together. And I'm always happy to get one of those gentlemen on the show, as we do have Mike Cutri aboard. He's doing great work over at FTM Bets, taking a look at this game that we all know and love of college basketball. And you're able to follow him on Twitter/X at Easy Enough, his first and last name, Mike Cutri, and then the letters CBB at the end, and my last name is spelled Cutri. And Mike, great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Hey, Greg, thanks for having me on, man. I'm a huge fan of your show and your work. I'm definitely excited to chop it up and talk some hoops with you.
I'm excited to have you aboard, as well as I know that you're making your tour of some of these multi-team events as you were out there at Madison Square Garden over the weekend. I know you've been taking in some good basketball over the last few days. And what did you see from those 2 games in Madison Square Garden on Sunday? Because we saw Texas get a very unexpected scare from Louisville, and I think it was a little bit less surprising that UConn just completely mopped the floor with Indiana.
Yeah, it was a great atmosphere there at the Garden. There was actually a ton of Indiana Hoosiers fans there, maybe about 75% of the fans.
They travel well.
Fans. Yeah, I was very surprised to see it. I was expecting more of a UConn faithful there. But yeah, they were loud. They did all they could to help their team. But honestly, from the tip, you could tell they really had no chance against UConn. I mean, first of all, how could you not be impressed with Tristan Newton? He is a straight gangster. He controlled the game from the tip, did everything he could to help his team win. And, UConn won the backcourt battle, and that really was what it was from the start. I was impressed by UConn. I thought the the pieces fit together for them a little more than I thought they would. You know, with Caravan as a stretch 4 and Spencer playing a little bit of ball handling responsibilities, I was really impressed with UConn. On the Indiana side, it really just comes down to their poor guard play. We've seen it all year to start. I mean, they have a ton of size, but zero floor spacing, Greg, and that's going to hurt them all year. The defense was good, but, you know, they're just not going to be able to generate enough offense to keep up with teams this year, and that's what it was. We did get a huge surprise on the Louisville, Texas side. Line was 17.5. I was actually on the Texas side, 17.5, which was over pretty much from the tip. So I didn't have much of a sweat going on, but the fans had a sweat. And, you know, I was super, super impressed by the fight that Louisville showed. You know, a lot of people may have expected them to give up on any signs of adversity, but kids were fighting for Kenny Payne. And, you know, maybe that's a testament to maybe them showing some fight in ACC play. We'll see, but it was really nice to see. And then on the Texas side, I mean, they are a little banged up. You know, Disu didn't play. Tyrese Hunter hurt his tailbone in the second half, didn't play much in the second half. Caden Shedrick's pretty much playing with one arm. But, you know, what really, really was their falling point was their defense. The defense looked really bad on the Texas side. The Louisville made it a point to attack Max Acement's all game. Guards were getting into the lane against them, and there's a lot of miscommunications on switches where they're getting the ball inside, where Max was inside, a little undersized. So Louisville took advantage of it, and they almost pulled out the victory. It took Max to come back and hit that crazy shot at the end. But yeah, it was an exciting day of hoops, and I'm super glad that I was actually able to see it live in person.
Absolutely. That was a lot of fun to be able to take a look at, and it was a very nice fight. And unfortunately, as we're recording this podcast, we have yet to get an opener on Louisville, Indiana, and UConn versus Texas. That's just the nature of the beast when it comes to these non-conference tournaments. A lot of books are not going to be putting those up until the AM, but certainly we've got the matchups that we were expecting, just a little bit of a roundabout way to get there with Texas needing a last-second winner to be able to do so. As joining me on the show, we've got Mike Cutri. He does great work over at FTN Bets. Joining me on Cusco Soups. And when it comes to these multi-team events, when it comes to these tournaments like the one that you were able to take in on Sunday, how do you gauge these? Because I do think that when you get a neutral court environment like this, it typically does hurt offense just a little bit more. And typically I think that that's a little bit more to the benefit of the underdog as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, a lot of these early season tournaments are played in bigger arenas, right? Where a lot of these teams aren't used to that depth. Like take the Garden, for example. You have a lot of space behind the basket where, you know, we've heard specifically college players who aren't really used to that wide space arena environment in their, you know, home or away courts in conference play really struggle and maybe take some time to gauge the depth. And you do see it with some offenses that struggle a lot. But, you know, when I'm looking at these early season tournaments, I'm especially this year and maybe the last few years, I'm really looking at two things. Number one, it's still very early in the season. And now more than ever with the transfer portal, teams are still figuring things out very early in the season, especially with their chemistry. A lot of these teams have a brand new roster construction, and I typically try to lean towards teams that may show more consistency and experience. Like if I'm looking at the Marriott Invitational, you know, teams like Tennessee and Marquette that have been together, have consistent coaching, maybe have a lot more consistency than some of these teams that have newer roster construction that, you know, are still trying to learn how to play with each other. And then number two, typically the way I typically lean towards betting is I'm more of a regression or contrarian better. But in these early season tournaments where you're playing back-to-back games, I typically like to stay with the hot hand. You know, hot shooting translates in these fast turnover day-over-day tournaments. And I typically, especially during feast week, I like to see if a team is really shooting the ball well, is hot offensively. That typically translates over to the rest of the tournament. I like to ride hot hands very much so in the early season.
Absolutely. And I do think that it is always interesting to balance that as well, because we notice early on during the season, some of these teams, they're going to come into these tournaments shooting like north of 50% from three-point range, which, as we know, the next team that shoots north of 50% from three-point range for the entirety of the season is going to be the first team that does so. And you see some of these teams are ice cold as well. And I always think that's the most fine line to balance and the most interesting way of taking a look at it. How do you try to take that all into account? Like a team that I bet on Sunday was Charleston because they went 21 of 117 from three in their first 4 games. And I just knew that there was no way that was going to be lasting. But I know that you as a player knows that sometimes when you're just missing shots left and right, that could very much snowball for a lot of these young kids who most of them are below the age of 23 years old.
You're absolutely right, Greg. And that's honestly has happened to me in the past a bunch of times. 1 year you have a really good shooting year and you shoot over 40% from three. And then maybe on average you're more of like a high 30s, and that always regresses to the mean eventually. And that's the same. And you try to take that into consideration, right? The difficult part about, betting, especially in college basketball, is it's a balancing act, right? You try to pick your spots. When do you ride the hot hand, or when do you try to play the regression data and the regression plays, right? So, Michigan State is another really good example this year where they shot, I think it was 2 of 31 from three in the first 2 games. I had a play on them against Duke thinking they would turn it around, and they didn't. So it's really a timing game. But for the most part, I'm with you. I try to not get too overreactive to poor shooting and try to play, more regression to the mean where, this team is typically a better 3-point shooting team, and they're going to turn it around at some point, and you try to time it as best you can.
Yep, and I do think that that's one of the most difficult things to do, because sometimes you'll take a team that is cold from three and they stay cold from three, and you're like, why in the heck did I do this? And then sometimes it's vice versa. Yeah, back that team has been so hot, and then they do hit a little bit of a wall. So it's just such a fine balancing act, and one of the most difficult things to do when it comes to betting college basketball. As Mike Cutri does amazing work over at FTN Bets, is joining me on Cuscoops. And Mike, when it comes to what we're getting on Monday, we've got ourselves some really good events. We've got the Fort Myers tip-off with Wisconsin versus Virginia going down for those that like defense, for those that like high-flying action. You've got like Purdue, Gonzaga, UCLA, Marquette. List goes on and on. But how about if we start with, in my opinion, the most marquee matchup, and it's one that I just mentioned, Purdue versus Gonzaga, with Purdue being between about a 4.5 to a 5-point favorite. Totals between 154.5 and 155.5. And with Purdue, I feel like that year 1 to year 2 bump for these guards and Fletcher Lawyer, Braden Smith has been very big. And for Gonzaga, I absolutely love the fact that they get Nembhard in the backcourt as well. And I really do think that this is a line that is starting to be the correct number, because I saw the opener of 3. I grabbed that with Purdue personally. But now that I think we're getting closer to 4.5 and 5, that's more representative of what it should be.
Wow, Greg, I'm actually really jealous that you grabbed it -3. I didn't see it. That's a really good number that you got it at. But yeah, I mean, the story with Purdue is going to be, from the ending of last season throughout this season is going to be, how is their guard play going to respond? They didn't really do much in the offseason to tend to the guard play. They bring in Lance Jones, who I think is a good fit, but maybe not going to answer the questions that we still have about how are they going to handle intense pressure. Think about from a defense like from a school from the SEC. But, is this matchup against Gonzaga going to exploit that backcourt's possible weakness still? And I don't think so, Greg. The Zags this year have they have a talented backcourt, but it's super, super thin. Behind Nembhard, behind Nolan Hickman, they really don't have much. And, it's going to be a battle of the front courts, and Purdue obviously has a much stronger front court. I do lean Purdue here, even given the 4.5, 5 range. I probably still have a lean on the Purdue side, but I'm excited to see the Zags hopefully compete and make this a close game. Hopefully it doesn't end up like it did last year. So yeah, I even at that number, I still have a lean. And again, I'm super jealous of that 3 number you got.
Yep, and certainly this is one that moved very quickly, because you saw it at 3, 3.5, and then instantly there's a lot of books that they couldn't even have a number up before this moved right to 4.5. So you really can't blame the books for making the move there, because I do think that now that we're at 4.5 to 5, much more representative of what this should be. And I do think that this one is intriguing as well for Maui. It's the Tennessee versus Syracuse game, because with Syracuse, I love the backcourt that they've got. I like what Judah Mintz is able to bring to the table. I think J.J. Starlin is still just scratching the surface of what his potential could be. And with Tennessee, we all know that this team is going to be one of the best teams offensively in all of college basketball. The Dalton Connect transfer, I felt like was big. And I take a look at this number of 14, and I think Tennessee should win this game. I wouldn't be surprised if they win this game by like 11, even 12, but I think 14 is starting to get a little bit too lofty.
It is a big number. And, maybe, Greg, I need to move out there to Vegas with you to get these better numbers. numbers, It's not a bad idea. But yeah, I agree. 14 is a big number. But to me, this is more of a stay away spot. There's so many question marks on the consistency of this Syracuse team. The way I think about this is that it can either be a close 5-point game or Syracuse can get the doors blown off and lose by 30. Again, it's super weird to see Syracuse not in that patented Boeheim 2-3 zone. And they're playing man-to-man this year. I know a lot of those guys are still used to getting man-to-man under the new system. They do have a tremendous point guard, a tremendous backcourt between Mintz and J.J. Starling. But yeah, this Tennessee team is just a well-oiled machine. Could be the best team defensively in the entire country. Veteran backcourt. To me, what I've seen so far this year, they may be the best team or most complete team in the entire country. And, I hope that translates to March because I have a nice little future on them. But bringing in Gainey and Dalton Knecht, I think really raises their offensive ceiling that have the past few seasons, maybe have hindered their performance or their consistency at some times. So yeah, I'm super high on this Tennessee team. I don't buy the Rick Barnes narrative that he can't win in March because, that seems to always get broken at some point. Jay Wright had that curse on him. Moni Bennett had that curse on him. Rick Barnes has that curse on him now, but I'm sure that will get broken at some point. I do agree with you, Greg, that the number's a little high at 14, but to me, this is too big of a risk to actually put some money down because I think it can go in many different directions.
Yeah, but when it comes to Tennessee as well, you can trust Tennessee in November, December. I have a tough time trusting them in March personally. It's a very long track record, but in November, December, they have been money for you. As we do have Mike Cutri, he does great work over at FTN Bets, joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Mike, I absolutely love this time of year because we've got just wall-to-wall action. You can get your day started if you want to with like 8:30 a.m. games. And there's going to be a game that starts after midnight on Monday, so it'll technically be starting very, very early Tuesday as well when it comes to that SoCal Challenge. But if there a game or a few games that you're taking a look at and either you've got to bet down on it for Monday or maybe it's not one that you've bet yet, but it's one that you're eyeing and perhaps you get there on it in the AM.
This week, I would say, is probably the second best week of the whole year, behind the first week of March, obviously. And, of course, there's going to be a lot of lost productivity throughout the week and a lot of full-time jobs just because you have day basketball, which is probably the greatest blessing we have after Christmas. So obviously I'm super excited. I haven't actually got any bets down just because I was, in New York. But, looking at the slate, speaking of the very late game, I'm really looking at this UCLA Marquette game. And to my point that I made before with these early season tournaments, like UCLA is a perfect example of a team that is still trying to figure itself out. They just got a couple guys eligible. Who knows what's going on with Dylan Andrews, who was a coach's scratch last game. He was their starting point guard. So there's a lot of, I would say, question marks going on in this really young UCLA team. I mean, I'm a huge believer in Mick Cronin figuring it out with this young, talented group, but maybe more towards the end of the season and not so much in the beginning of the season. And they're running into a complete buzzsaw on Marquette, who has probably the best point guard in the country and super, super talented pieces around him. Cam Jones, Oso Ighodaro make an incredible trio. Now, I saw the number around 5, and I think that's too low with so many question marks and uncertainty around this young UCLA team. So I'm definitely be leaning getting Marquette early, and I actually like them to make some noise in this tournament.
Yep, I am with you on Marquette as well. With this Marquette bunch, they are such a veteran roster. They bring back pretty much everyone other than Maxime's Prosper, which, that was a big loss for them. But to your point with this UCLA team, them being so young, and the raw talent is there, but the youth, I think, is going to be hurting them. And then the one game that we didn't talk about from Maui, Kansas and Chaminade, when we see a lineup as we are doing this without one, would not be surprised if this line is right around 50. So that one might be a little bit harder to bet, but I know you, Mike, are doing a tremendous job taking a look at this great game of college basketball over at FTN Bets. I know that your entire staff over there at FTN is just absolutely tremendous. So love to get people at home know what's on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
I post all my content over at FTN Bets, strictly doing college basketball content. I actually did a little bit of work for Shot Quality Bets last tournament in March. So I'm sure I'll work something up with those guys as well. Also very great guys. And, I'm always posting my thoughts and a couple free plays here and there over on Twitter. And you can follow me at Mike Cutri CBB. If you have any questions or want to talk some hoops, my DMs are always open, so feel free to reach out. But, Greg, awesome having me on. I appreciate you, and always great talking to a fellow D3 hooper who knows the game as well as you do.
Yes, sir. UW Oshkosh rise up, and always good to be able to get a tie-in with Justin Perry as well, who does great work over there at Chocolate Bets as well. One of my favorites on this podcast, and Mike quickly becoming one of my favorites as well. He does a great job over at FTM Bets, so it was great to get him aboard. Big thanks to Mike for joining me on Cuss part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming next, it is that time of the podcast to give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Monday as we hit some big shots. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Cuss Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Great to get Mike Cutri aboard. It was his first time joining the podcast, and hopefully not the last. He is doing amazing work over at FTM Bets. Really admire what he's able to put out there because he's a man that used to play college basketball himself. Us non-D1 guys, I'm a D3 guy myself from UW Oshkosh. We must stand together. Mike is doing an amazing job taking a look at this game that we all know and love, and his insights very tremendous. So big thanks to him for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Monday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at unit_81. We are going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order. This is where we go with the games with 3 digits on the rotation first, and then the games with 6 digits are at the bottom. That involves like the America East, the Big South, the SWAC, the MEAC. The exception is these conference tournaments, and the way that these games are aligned on the 3-digit rotation numbers is that it pretty much goes by order of tip time with regards to these tournaments. Like the first tournament that we are going to be seeing coming up, that would be the Gulf Coast Showcase, and then the Cayman Islands, Sunshine Slam, and you just go down the list. So let's get things started with 8-11, 8-12 on the betting board. Neutral court game between UNC Wilmington and Murray State. Murray State opens up a 6-point underdog. They're now between 4.5 and 5-point underdogs, and your total on this game is 146.5. This is very intriguing because I made Murray State the favorite, so I definitely agree with the line move. I just don't understand why UNC Wilmington started out as a favorite. Now, recognize UNC Wilmington has covered north of 60% of their games each of the last 2 seasons, and this team does a very good job of being able to slow things down, playing some good, hard, tenacious defense. But if you look at teams that have been luckiest in college basketball last years, UNC Wilmington is right there at the top. And this is going to be a game from Fort Myers, Florida, so neither team has a home court advantage. Tarzarian White is going to be a little bit of a hard guard for Murray State. For Wilmington to be able to put up 19 points, 5 boards last season, was one of the team's primary scorers, is able to give you a steal per contest. So just a really good glue guy that's able to give you some nice scoring as well. You bring back from a season ago the likes of a Malik Harden-Hayes, Shaquem Phillips as well. A pair of guys give you about 12 points per contest. But UNC Wilmington is right now shooting north of 50% from 3-point range. I recognize that they added KJ Jenkins, who is a north of 40% 3-point shooter at New Mexico. This is just not realistic. Murray State is also shooting 38% from 3. We should be seeing that taper off a little bit, but I like what they've got in the backcourt. Jacoby Wood, Rob Perry, these guys have been able to average a combined 28.5 points per contest, 6 assists. Wood is shipping in there darn near 2 steals per contest as well. They've also been able to get quite a bit out of Sean Walker Jr. The transfer from Mercer was able to shoot 40% from 3 a season ago. I felt like he was a good under-the-radar addition for this team. They do have a little bit of question mark down low, but Nick Ellington, who's coming from Eastern Illinois, he's been able to shore things up with a little bit over 9 rebounds per game. I think that Murray State is really getting a lot of short shrift here. They've got a lot of guys that returned from a season ago. I think that Steve Fromm is doing a good job of being able to coach these guys up, and I do think that for UNC Wilmington, they have been the beneficiaries of some fortunate 3-point shooting, and I just don't think that the defense is quite the same as it was a season ago, though I do think that both of these teams cool off from 3-point range, to say the least. It's been a blistering start for both, so I did set my total at 142, diving in on the under. Wilmington typically slows things down, but I do think that with Ellington, you're going to see Murray State win from within. I'm going to take Murray State outright on the money line to go along with this total under. We go 813, 814 on the betting board. This is from John W. Pope Jr. Convention Center as the Citadel and Idaho St to battle, and the Citadel is between a 1 to a 2-point favorite. 134.5 to 135 is your total, seeing a 135.5 out there as well. And I did set my total at 140.5. Going to be looking at the over. We have seen the Citadel slow down ever since Ed Conroy took over as coach. They're not quite this slow, though. This is a game that's being played in the great state of North Carolina, by the way, so the Citadel certainly has a leg up there, and I do think that that's very critical. I did set the Citadel as a 4.5-point favorite on a truer neutral court environment. This line I probably set a little bit closer to 3, and I do think that for the Citadel, they've got the best rebounder in this game, Quentin Malora Brown, who comes in from Vanderbilt. He saw some starts the last 2 seasons, and he has been tremendous down low with about 9.8 rebounds at a block per contest. Not necessarily a dynamic scorer, but you don't need him to be because you've got Elijah Morgan, you've got A.J. Smith. These two guys combined for about 25 points per contest. Citadel's only shooting about 27% from 3, by the way. They're not an amazing 3-point shooting team, but that should be going northward. And they've got Whiston Hill, who he was a top rebounder at Presbyterian 2 seasons ago before getting injured last season. And I just don't think that Idaho St is going to be able to do a solid job against that. You do have Kiri Huey, who comes in from the junior college level, was a top 100 junior college transfer. He's been able to give the team 7 boards, a little bit over a block per contest, but other than Braden Parker, last season he was able to give you about 5 to 6 rebounds per game. That's all you got down low, and you really don't have that main trigger man for this team. You're looking at Miguel Tomley being able to headline the offense. Last year, 11.5 points, mid-33-point shooter with 2 assists per contest. You've been able to get in the neighborhood about 11 points per game out of Malik Arrington as well. He's been able to step up. After a season ago, he was a bit more of a reserve, but I do have massive question marks with this Idaho St team and how they're going to be able to fare down low. It's an Idaho St team that in their 2 games against Division I competition have failed to break the 55-point plateau, which is why we are seeing such a low total. And for the Citadel, they have given up north of 70 points against every D1 team that they played, so it's a good old situation if something's got to give. But the Citadel held in there relatively well against NC State. They were able to hold in there against Boston College. I do think that they get the job done from within, especially in the state of North Carolina. So, want to lay it with the Citadel, set them as a 4.5-point favorite, and I did set my total at a 140.5. I think that late game felling can help out with this total as well. So, looking at the over and going to be taking a look at the Citadel. 815, 816 on the betting board. East Carolina plays host to Georgia Southern. Georgia Southern is a underdog of 11.5 points. Your total, it is 145. I originally set East Carolina as a 10.5-point favorite. I had to drop this to 9 after we saw what happened yesterday with Northeastern going on the road and getting it done. Brandon Johnson is still currently out of the fold for East Carolina. He's been dealing with an illness, so even if he goes in this game, he's probably not going to be 100%. So that is why here at an 11.5, I'm going to be taking a look at the points with Georgia Southern. Georgia Southern, not the team that they were a season ago. They lose Andre Seversov, a 6'7" combo player that did a little bit of everything for the team, and now they've had to have Russell Dean be Mr. Do-It-All for the team. And Russell Dean, while he was over at Hampton last year, put up 13 points, 4.5 assists. That Hampton team was completely terrible, and he's never really been a great 3-point shooter, but I do think that if this team can get a little bit more down low, because Carlos Curry has almost been an afterthought. He entered into yesterday with 4 points to 2.5 rebounds per game after last year. He was getting more like 7 points, 7 boards per contest. If you could get something out of Jamar Franklin, who comes in from South Alabama, where he was a mid-33-point shooter, a nice role player, you're definitely staring at something here with Georgia Southern. Meanwhile, for East Carolina, they've just been putting the ball in the hands of R.J. Felton with Brandon Johnson out of the fold. He's been able to do a nice job being able to give the team north of 20 points per contest, shooting well above 40% from 3-point range, but who else around him is going to be able to step up? You've been able to get north of 15 points per contest out of Azara Usar. He's been able to do a nice job being able to spread the floor, and then you've got Caleb Count, who's able to give you a few assists per game, and this team has been able to do a nice job of being able to rip the ball away, but without Brandon Johnson down low, this team doesn't have a ton of rebounding. Cam Bryant has really stepped up down low for Georgia Southern with his 8+ rebounds per contest as well, so I look at this Georgia Southern bunch, and I do think that they could be able to bust through here. They actually played quite well against Kennesaw St. Go Owls yesterday, so I feel like this line is a little bit too inflated with everything that's going on with Brandon Johnson on the side of East Carolina. Did set my total at 141. East Carolina did a good job of being able to take away the ball on Georgia Southern. Does have their shooting deficiencies. They were able to put up 92 points against Kennesaw State. I feel like that was a very, very hot performance that we won't see duplicate itself, so taking a look at the under and the points with Georgia Southern. 817, 818 on the betting board. It is Stony Brook. They play us a Rider. Rider's an underdog of 2 points. 137.5 to 138.5 is your total. And I set Stony Brook as a favorite of 4 points. I'm going to be willing to lay the number with the Stony Brook bunch. Certainly has been a just tumultuous last 12 months for them because they dealt with so many injuries last year. Aaron Clark was limited to less than 5 games. They were without Dean Knoll for the entirety of the season, and you could tell how different the team is with them back. Both of these guys are combining for about 22 points per contest. Clark is shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range. They've combined for 4 steals per contest. Clark is really your main trigger man in terms of facilitating, so that's big. And then you got the versatility of Keenan Fitzmaurice, a 7-footer that's able to pop threes. Not necessarily the world's greatest three-point shooter, and you'd like to see a little bit more than 4 rebounds per game, but when you're able to throw in there Toby Okonwo, who last season was able to give the team 8 points, some solid three-point shooting, that's massive. And for this Rider team, you just have a lack of depth with this team. They lose Ajiri Aguemo Johnson from season ago, so they're really looking at Tariq Ingram, the transfer from Wake Forest, to be able to take hold down low, be able to give the team right around 6 points, 6 boards, a block per contest. But in the backcourt, Alan Boom Boom Powell, who was a starter a season ago, he just has not been able to give a lot of scoring after the last 2 seasons, was a double-figure scorer. Career about 33% three-point shooter. It's only putting in there about 7 points per contest. Now, you've had a nice surprise in Corey McKeithen. He has come in from being a reserve a season ago, and he's been able to do a nice job exploding for about 12 points per contest. His career about 26% three-point shooter, though. I think that's going to be tapering off a little bit. You've got someone like a Mervyn James who's able to give you like 14 points, 6 boards, good versatility, along TJ Weeks, who's been a career mid-30s three-point shooter and a double-figure scorer. But for Rider, they really don't have much of a bench to be able to help them out. Stony Brook, you do have quite a few guys, like a Charles Mado who comes in from Fairfield. Andre Snoddy is able to give you a few rebounds per game as well. He comes in from Central Connecticut. I do think that depth is going to lead Stony Brook to a victory in a relatively low-scoring game. Both of these teams not really looking to play up-tempo. Reiner, as a matter of fact, has yet to get past 65 points against a Division I opponent this season, so did set my total 136, diving in on the under, and with Stony Brook, willing to lay up to 3.5 with them. 819, 820 on the betting board. It is Troy playing us the same East State. Same East State, a 1.5 to a 2-point favorite. Your total between 143 and 144. I made Troy the 2.5-point favorite, so I'm going to be taking Troy outright on the money line with the Trojans. They do lose quite a bit from a season ago, but I still think that they're going to be fine in an ordeal against a Sam East State team, which they lose their coach in Jason Newton out of like your main 9-man rotation from a season ago. They lose pretty much 5 of those guys as well, so this team is in a little bit of flux, and they've had to look to Davon Barnes, who was a top scorer over at Texas Southern a season ago, to be able to take hold of the offense, who has been able to give you about 16 points per contest. You've got Jaden Ray playing off the ball, giving you about 5 boards, 5 assists, 9 points per contest. At 5'10", he's also giving you those rebounds, so that's been big, but just haven't had necessarily good consistency down low in the post. And for Troy, I do think that Thomas Dowd is going to be able to take advantage of that. He's a 6'8" freshman that's been able to burst onto the scene, shooting about 38.5% for 3, 11 points, 6 boards. Has been a very good, versatile player for this Troy team. And then you got Christian Eugene, who has really become a nice facilitator for the team after he was more of a double-figure scorer a season ago. And I think that the versatility that someone like an Amir Muhammad is able to bring to the table is going to be big as well. Muhammad was a highly touted junior college transfer from a season ago, put up like 10 points, 2.5 assists per contest, like what he's been able to bring to the table with Troy. They don't necessarily have that one go-to scorer. They're one of those whole is greater than some of its parts teams, and Sam Houston State, they were very much at last season, but with the coaching change and with all the moving parts from a season ago, they're just not able to play that style, and I think that plays right into the hands of a Troy team that is a little bit more defense-oriented, going up against the Sam Houston State team that over the last few seasons, they have been one of the slower teams in all of college basketball as well. So, did set my total 136.5 going in on the under with Troy. I feel like they should be the slight favorites. Going to ride with Troy on the money line and going to be taking a look at this total under 821, 822 on the betting board. It is St. Joe's, and they hit the road, and they hope to not be average Joe's against Kentucky. Kentucky between 15 to 15.5 point favorites. Totals between 147 and 148. It has been the best of times and the worst of times for St. Joe's. As for St. Joe's, they had scored 100 points earlier last week against Stony, and then they scored 54 points against Texas A&M Commerce. So they have been all over the place, but I think water finds its level, and I think St. Joe's can hang in there. I set them as 14.5 point underdogs. Like what Eric Reynolds is able to bring to the table. It's been a high 33-point shooter over the last few seasons. A season ago was able to put in there 15-plus points per contest. He's picking up right where he left off a season ago. Now, if you do have a little bit of concern with St. Joe's, it's the fact that the depth is not necessarily too terrific, but you have a point guard they like in Lynn Greer that a season ago was able to give out about 4 assists per contest. He's up to 5 assists with 1.8 turnovers per game this season, shooting a blistering 62.5% from 3-point range. That'll certainly taper off a little bit, and then been able to get a little bit more rebounding as well. Chris Adesoko, he's a 7-footer that comes in from France. He's been able to do a nice job being able to pull in there just under 7 rebounds per contest. Overall for St. Joe's, only shooting about 32% from 3, but they've cut down on the turnovers to about 11 per contest. You've got guys like Cooper Klanzic along Cameron Brown that were double-figure scorers a season ago that have had a little bit of slow starts in terms of the scoring department. I think that they could pick it up against a Kentucky team that has a lot of talent, but they're also very young. You saw a nice double-double performance out of Abdou Thiero in that loss against Kansas over the past week or so. He looked very good there, and I do think that there's a lot of upside on that front, but really other than Antonio Reeves along with Trey Mitchell, you don't have guys that have really been in these battles before. Reeves has done a solid job, giving the team 18 points per contest, and then you got Trey Mitchell, who's just Mr. Versatile at 6'9", is able to give you 12.5 points, 6.5 boards, shooting about from 3, and for Kentucky as a whole, they're shooting 37.5% from 3 with about 8 turnovers per contest. I do attribute that a little bit to the teams that they played against. Kansas is a tenacious defense, but not a defense that's going to rip it away. Texas A&M Commerce, New Mexico State, Stony. I mean, these are bum of the month club sort of teams that I do think that St. Joe's going to be able to put a little bit of pressure on these guys like Robert Dillingham, and DJ Wagner has yet to live up to his billing as well. So I do take a look at this spot. I do think that line is a little bit overinflated. I do think that both of these teams are going to be having a few more turnovers than what they've had to begin the season. I did set my total at 144.5. I'm going to be diving in on the under, and when it comes to St. Joe's, we'll take 15 or more with them. 823, 824 on the betting board. UW Green Bay is on the road facing off against Montana State. Montana State is between an 11 to an 11.5 point favorite. Totals between 133.5 and 134.5. 11.5 is a max I'm going to be willing to lay, but I'm willing to lay 11.5. I set my line at 12. UW Green Bay has a really good scorer, Noah Reynolds, who was able to put up a double-figure amount of points while he was over at Wyoming last season, and I mean, he has been tremendous for this UW Green Bay team. North of 20 points, 4.7 boards, 4.7 assists, despite shooting 11.1% from 3, and he's going to shoot better than 11.1% from 3 when it's all said and done. There is nothing else around him, though. Foster Wonders was a reserve over at Southern Illinois, and they're looking to get him going. Elijah Jones comes in from the non-Division I level, and he's been solid. He's been able to give the team like 9 boards per contest, but Green Bay is right now shooting 22.5% from 3. That is going to go northward. I don't know how much northward it's going to go because it's a rough team. Meanwhile, for Montana State, a little bit of a changing of the guard without Danny Sprinkle in there, but Brandon Walker's come in from UT Arlington where he was a part-time starter, and he's dominated down low. He's been able to give the team 16 points per contest, not necessarily giving you a ton of boards at 6'7", but has been just that ultimate offensive piece that this team has needed. You've got someone like a Trey Patterson, who throughout his career has been a high 33-point shooter, and then Mr. Do-It-All in Robert Ford III. You go back to what he was able to do while he was over at Idaho State for a pair of seasons, and he's averaging about 11 points, north of 5.5 rebounds, just under 3 assists per contest. I really like what he's able to bring to the table. You're able to throw in there a little bit more of a pass-first guy with 4 assists per contest, and Eddie Turner down for what the third, who, when he was out there for Columbia 2 seasons ago, was very solid, but just was dealing with injuries. Now that he's fully healthy, he's able to make a nice little impact for the team. UW Green Bay just at this point does not have the depth, and I do like what is being built over there by Sundance Wicks, but other than Noah Reynolds, you're able to take everything away. Montana State should be able to win this battle on the glass very easily, and for UW Green Bay against Division I competition and have scored 44 and 59 points in their first 2 games. So I do think that this is going to be a low-scoring slug against the Montana State team that's clearly not looking to push tempo themselves. They have yet to break the 70-point plateau against a D1 opponent as well. So did set my total at a 132. Going to be diving in on the under and one to lay up to 11.5 with Montana State. 825, 826 on the betting board. It is Pacific, and they play us in North Dakota. North Dakota between a 4 to a 5-point underdog, and your totals between 152.5 and 154. And with Pacific, set them as 6-point favorites. I am going to be willing to lay this number with Pacific. They have been all over the place as we saw them go on the road and knock off Cal, and then you saw them a few days later be down 40 at the half against Nevada. So a little bit less than terrific, but what is pretty terrific for Pacific is what you're able to get out of Tyler Beard, someone who a season ago gave out 4 assists while shooting north of 40% for 3. Off to a slow start this year with 5.5 points per contest. I do think that he's going to be able to pick it up. You got Judson Martindale, Donovan Williams, both being able to give you about 11 points per contest. With Martindale, he shot about 40% from 3-point range a season ago. If you're looking at a big giant kryptonite for Pacific, it's the fact that they don't have a ton down low on the glass, but it's not like North Dakota has a ton either. They're looking at BJ Omot to do a little bit of everything. A nice 6'8" combo player was the starter last season where he had 12 points, 3.5 boards per contest, and he's up to more like 20.5 points, 7.5 rebounds per game thus far this season. But Eli King has been a little bit turnover prone coming on from Iowa State. You've got Sonsei Sarste, who's been able to give you about 12 points per game, and for North Dakota, they're shooting about 31.5% from 3, but the last 3 years, this team has ranked outside the top 300 in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis. Their offensive numbers very much warped by the fact that they were able to play against a non-Division I school in Valley City, and for Pacific, the team has been able to do a relatively solid job of having some effective offense. Now, it's been all over the place. In their 4 games this year, they have scored 57, 87, 39, and 77 points. So it's been the best of times and it's been the worst of times, but they've been able to carve up bad defense. North Dakota is a bad defense. I do think that perhaps this total has went a little bit too far as North Dakota doesn't necessarily play with a bunch of tempo, and I do think that their offensive numbers are a little bit heightened by the fact that they played the non-Division I school in Valley City. But that said, did set my total 148, diving in on the under with Pacific. Their Achilles heel not going to be really exposed, so going to be one to lay the number. Set Pacific as a 6-point favorite. Now we head to Old Florida for the Gulf Coast Showcase. 827, 828 on the betting board. High Point and Iona do battle. Iona between a 5 to a 5.5 point favorite, and your total between 153 and 153.5. I said Iona is a 9.5 point favorite. I'm going to be one to lay the number with Iona. Very much a makeshift and new roster, but I do like what Tobin Anderson is able to do. He is used to this, coaching at the non-Division I level, and gets to go up against a High Point team, which they've got a lot of moving parts as well. Now, what I like about this High Point team, how about what Duke Miles has been able to do thus far this season? Comes in from Troy after he was completely injured last season, and in the last few seasons in general has been injured, but a career 3 assists per game guy that's able to get other guys involved. I mean, when he went down last year, he was shooting 47% for 3. It was more of a career about 30%3-point shooter, but I mean, he plays very well in tandem with Abdoulaye Thiam, who was a 15-plus point per game scorer a season ago. Keza Gifa, he comes in from UTEP, and he's been able to do a nice job with about 13.5 points per contest as well, but High Point really doesn't have a ton of rebounding. You've had Cade Putter come in, and he's been able to do a solid job, giving you about 9 boards per contest, but really nobody else is able to offer a ton on the glass. Meanwhile, for Iona, you've got Osborne Shema along with Greg Gordon, a pair of guys that are able to do a nice job of being able to pound the glass. Shema has been dealing with a little bit of an issue, and I would not be surprised if he misses this game, but the man that has been impacting this team, Eden Tertout, who comes in from Harvard, part-time starter over the last 2 seasons, who has been able to give the team 51 points in the first 2 games of the season, career about 33% 3-point shooter. And then you've got Wiza Ponzo, a 6'7" combo player that over at Stetson a season ago shot 47% from the outside with about 8.5 points, 4.5 boards. I think that is going to be a very hard guard for this High Point team. High Point, we saw them be one of the worst defenses in all of college basketball a season ago. They have to go up against an Iona team that does a good job of not hurting themselves. They bring in someone from Cal and Joel Brown who does a good job of just being able to keep things steady, and I do think that steady Eddie offense going to be able to get it done for Iona. I did set my total of 153.5. If you have like an 8 to a 10-point game with a minute remaining, I do think that High Point gives those fellas, and High Point certainly a team that's looking to push tempo to say the least. We saw that on display when they played a 99-98 game against Wofford about a week or so ago. So looking at the over, and I'm willing to lay up to 9 with Iona. 8:29, 8:30 on the betting board. It is Illinois State and Long Beach State doing battle from Florida, and with Long Beach State, they are between 6.5 and 7-point favorites. Your total is 153.5. Set my total at a 154. Not really willing to go anything further than a 153.5, but at this number, I'm going to be willing to go over it. I'm willing to lay up to 7.5 with Long Beach State. You've got the Traores, who have been so tremendous for Long Beach State. Abubakar Traore is a 6'6", little bit of a versatile guy that last year gave the team about 8 boards, a double-figure amount of points, 3.5 assists per contest, while Lacine Traore was a double-double machine, a little bit more of a back-to-the-basket big man. And now you've had Marcus Siones, who really struggled with his shot last year, become that go-to guy thus far this season. 22.8 points per game. Still a little bit of a roll of the dice in terms of his three-point shooting. Overall for his career has been about a 34.5% three-point shooter, but he's certainly been able to get the job done thus far this season. And then for Illinois State, they've really been looking to Dalton Banks to be able to run the show. He's been able to give the team 13 points, 4 boards, 4 assists after it's a little bit of an afterthought at Southern Illinois a season ago, and I do like his overall game. Malachi Poindexter said to turn into an off-the-ball scorer, which that's not really his forte. He's been able to give you about 15 points, 6 boards per contest, but you do have to be wondering what you're going to be able to get down low on this team, as you still have Kendall Lewis in the fold, who feels like he has been at this program for an eon, and I still remember Kendall Lewis started out the year so well a season ago, and then he just tapered off, and this season it's only giving you 7 points per game while pulling in there about 6 boards per contest. Played 4 full seasons of college basketball. It's never really averaged less than 7.5 points per contest, so that's a little bit just off-putting in general. You have been able to get a little bit more size out of someone like Brandon Lieb, who comes in from Illinois, was glued to the bench, but he's 7'1", so he's able to rebound, but I think the Traores are just too much for Illinois State down low. Illinois State really doesn't have that main point guard aside from Banks, who I've got my question marks with him. So this is a spot where I did set Long Beach State as an 8-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number, and Long Beach State has really been speeding teams up. Illinois State shoddy with their defense, so going to be taking a look at the over and willing to lay up to 7.5 with the Beach. 8:31, 8:32 on the betting board. Wright State and Louisiana are doing battle from Florida. Louisiana between a 1 to a 2-point favorite with your total between 153.5 and 154.5. If Trey Kelvin was healthy, I'd be taking Wright State outright on the money line, and I'd be riding with them. The problem is he is not. He missed the team's last game against Indiana, so I did set Louisiana as a 2.5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to ride with them. We really do not know the status of Trey Kelvin, but even if he plays, there is no way that he is going to be 100%, and I think that's what a lot of people forget, because they always ask if a player is in or out. What you should be asking is if a player is going to be actually healthy, if they are going to play as well, and I don't think that that is going to be the case with Mr. Kelvin. So even if he does come back, you can't restore him to full status, but you can restore Tanner Holden to full status, as he is holding it down for this Wright State team. He has been pretty solid after he spent 1 year at Ohio State. He has come back, give the team 18 points, 6 boards, 4.5 assists, shooting 40% from three-point range. He's just filling it up, but without Kelvin in the fold, who's been able to give you in his 2 games a combined 55 points, you really don't have a lot of options after that. Andrew Wellage along with Alex Herbergeste, hopefully I said that correctly. They both have been able to give you about 8.5 points per contest. It's a Wright State team that's shooting 37% from 3, but also a bunch that's turning the ball over a ton, because Tanner Holden is pretty much the main ball handler for this team, so that's led to nearly 13 turnovers per contest. Louisiana has had nearly 13 turnovers per game, but Famous Folks has been able to give you north of 6 assists per game. He's become a better scorer this year with 18 points per contest. Louisiana is missing Jordan Brown down low, but they've been able to find a nice double-double machine in Joe Charles, who's right now giving you 12 points, 10 boards per contest, was pretty much in the shadow of Jordan Brown a season ago when he was able to log about 4 boards per contest. And then you do have Kentrell Garnett, who the last 2 seasons has shot north of 41.5% from three-point range, has been able to shoot 40% from three once again this season. I think that there's just too many weapons for a Louisiana team that really looks to play up-tempo, and for Wright State, even without Drake Calvin in the fold, they still got to 80 in their last game against Indiana. Now, their offensive numbers are warped a little bit by the competition that they played, but both of these teams are certainly looking to go up-tempo. Both of these teams are going to play games with a high amount of possession, so I did set my total at 154.5. I'm going to be looking at the over of Louisiana. Willing to lay up to 2 with them. 833, 834 on the betting board. Buffalo is going to be playing as Hofstra. Hofstra is a 9.5 point favorite, and your total on this game is anywhere between 148 and 149, and with the old pride of Hofstra, I did set them as a favorite of 11.5 points. I am going to be willing to lay it. Buffalo is just not the same team that they have been. They are under the tutelage of a new coaching regime as well, and they're really looking at Anquan Bolden Jr., yes, the son of that wide receiver, to be able to hold it down in the backcourt, as they've gotten some good production down the other side. Chapman, he's been able to log 15 points, 8 boards per game, but they really don't have that guard that's able to facilitate. Bolden Jr. as a freshman has been able to give you about 6 points per contest, but really not a great 3-point shooter at this point in his career. You have been able to get about 12.5 points, 12.5 boards out of Janavius Smith, who a season ago he was really able to take off towards the back half of the season last year as well. But when it comes to this Hofstra team, the backcourt should just absolutely destroy Buffalo. You've got Tyler Thomas, Alon Darlson, Dunbar. These 2 guys are combined for 37 points, 8.5 boards, with Thomas shooting 42% from three-point range. Now, down low, this team is a little bit, shall we say, suspect. You've been able to get about 6 rebounds per game out of Silas Sunday. He comes in from Iona. I think that he can be an impact guy, but past that, you really don't have a ton of true size. They need to get Jakob Fritz in the fold a little bit more. He's a 6'10" gentleman that does come in from Canisius, but what I think is also a difference maker for the team, the reliable point guard play of Jaquan Carlos. He's been able to give you 6.7 assists, does turn the ball over about 3.5 times per contest, but he's able to do a good job of finding Thomas and Dunbar in rhythm, as Hofstra has been able to shoot about 35.5% from 3. Just don't have that efficient of scoring with Buffalo. And for Hofstra, they really were a great defensive team towards the back half of the season last year as well, while Buffalo, they're just miring in mediocrity. One night they'll score 86 points and give up 92. The next they'll give up 70 and score 56 points. So they just sort of are a go-with-the-flow team. I set my total at 145.5. Like the way that this Hofstra team has stepped it up on defense in conference play last season. So diving in on the under. And with this bunch of Buffalo, needed at least 12 points to take a shot on them. So looking at Hofstra and looking at the under. 835, 836 on the betting board. Oakland is going to be playing against Loyola Marymount. No numbers currently up on this game as both of these teams played yesterday, but I do have my handicap. Want to lay up to 4.5 points with Loyola Marymount, and at a 148.5 or less, taking a look at the over, 149.5 or higher. Going to be taking a look at the under, set Marymount as a 5-point favorite, because I do think that with Oakland, though they've got a guy that I like in Trey Townsend. Townsend a season ago, 17 plus points per contest, mid-30s 3-point shooter, as a 6'8" versatile piece. And with Oakland, they did look a little bit better on defense in their first few games of the season. It is still a big question mark, and you're just not getting a lot of production off the bench. Now, good news for Oakland is Rocket Watts finally did something yesterday. This guy had put in there 10 points in the first 3 games of the season. He went off for 23 yesterday, but he's still a career about 25% 3-point shooter. He really doesn't do a lot to facilitate. He's not a great defender. I just don't understand what he really does. You've got Isaiah Jones, who has not been able to lend a lot of production ever since coming over from Detroit. I do like what you're able to get out of Chris Conway. Chris Conway has been able to give you about 8.5 points per contest, and has been a solid reserve for Oakland. But you do take a look at the flip side, what you're able to get out of this Loyola Marymount team, and they bring in the Gonzaga transfer and Dominic Harris, who's been able to give you 17 points per contest. Down low, you've got Kelly Leu Pepe, who last season was able to give you 6 boards, double figure amount of points at 6'6". He's able to pop threes. And the 7-footer Lars Steeman, who comes in from Cal, he should be too much for Oakland to be able to handle. And then on top of that, you've got a very efficient point guard in Justice Hill, who 2 seasons ago was over at Murray State. Last season was at LSU, and you can tell just wasn't a fit at LSU, but when you saw him at Murray State 2 years ago, 13.5 points, 5 assists, and 1.9 turnovers per game, has never had more than 2 turnovers per contest, and has been very efficient thus far this season, allowing Loyola Marymount to play freely. Oakland is clearly looking to play a little bit more defense than a season ago, but Loyola Marymount, they're looking to step up their offense compared to a season ago. So at a 148.5 for less, looking at the over, 149.5 for higher to the under, and with Loyola Marymount, 1 to lay up to 4.5 with them, 5.5 or more, taking the points with Oakland. 837, 838 on the betting board. Stone Cold Steve F. Austin is going to be playing against Drake. This is also out there in the Cayman Islands. No numbers currently up on this game, but with the old Drake, I did set them as a 7.5 point favorite. 1 to lay up to 7 with them, 8 or more. Going to be taking a look at Stephen F. Austin. Stephen F. Austin's style is very hard to prepare for because they do such a good job of being able to generate steals, being able to put pressure on the ball. And for Drake, they are in a little bit of transition at the point guard spot, but I think that Tucker DeVries is so special that he's just able to bust through anything. DeVries, in his 3 games this far this season, has been able to deliver well north of 20 points per contest. He's been able to do a good job dishing it out with about 4 assists per game. Now, he had a little bit of an off-scoring night against Oakland, only being able to put in their 5 points in that game on Sunday, but still gave you 11 boards. Still did a good job of being able to find guys in space, as now he's got a little bit more help in the backcourt with Kevin Overton coming in as a true freshman. He has started right away. He's been able to shoot north of 40% from 3-point range with right around 15 or so points per contest. You've got a little bit of something down low in Carlos Rosario as well. He's been a little bit of a reserve, began his career at Washington State. If he can get going, that'd be big. And then you've also been able to have Mr. Aiton Wright, who comes in from CSUN, being able to give the team a little bit north of 18 points per contest as well. On the other side, you've got a Stephen F. Austin team with Day Hall, who's been able to give you 15 plus points per contest, and Stephen F. Austin was a top 25 team in the country in terms of 3-point shooting percentage, a top 20 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but a bottom 20 team in terms of taking care of the ball, in terms of turnovers they allowed on a per possession basis. Throw in there the fact that Drake has Darnell Brody being able to do a good job of being able to hold it down low. It's going to be a little bit too much, in my opinion, for Stephen F. Austin, even with AJ Kajuse, who's been able to do a nice job of dishing it out, 4.3 assists per contest, but really doesn't give you a lot of scoring. So I did set my total 143.5. Drake, a top 40 defense in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis a season ago. Stephen F. Austin, a team that's quite sloppy with the ball, but a team that going into this tournament had allowed 70 points or fewer in every one of their games this far this season. So 143 or less, looking at the over, 144 or higher to the under end with Drake. 1 to lay up to 7 with them. 8 or more going to be taking a look at Stone Cold Stephen F. Austin. 839, 840 on the betting board. It is Florida International, and they are going to be playing against Marshall. This is out there in the Cayman Islands. Florida International, a 2.5 point favorite. Total is 155.5. I know that Marshall lost quite a bit from last season, but I feel like they should be the favorite here. I set them as a 3-point favorite. I'm going to be taking them outright on the money line with Florida International. They also lost Denver Jones, their top scorer from a season ago, and this team does a relatively solid job of being able to generate turnovers, but this is not necessarily a great jump shooting team. They have their issues on the glass, and I do think that the duo of Nate Martin coupled with what you're able to get out of Obiana Onchile Killian is going to be able to win out. Onchile Killian in non-conference play 2 seasons ago was averaging 4 blocks per contest. Now, he's been dealing with a little bit of an injury. He was out of the fold in that game against Utah State, which that's a big reason why they did sort of get pounded in that game, but at the same time, you still have Nate Martin, who's able to give you about 8.5, 9 rebounds per game. And FIU, I just don't think that they're going to be able to match up with that. FIU in the backcourt certainly has Sean Giddens, who's been able to give you about 12 points per contest. Entered into yesterday shooting about 38% from 3-point range. Should be seeing a little bit of a downward spiral there. But Jonathan Ibar, he's been only able to give you right around about 4.5, 5 boards per contest. Was solid at North Florida. Big step up in competition for him. Arterio Dean, he's had to be Mr. Do-It-All for this team, doling out about 5.5 to 6 assists per contest, 13.5 points, solid 3-point shooter, but not a lot of depth really with both of these teams, but especially Florida International. They've been looking to guys like Mohamed Sanogo, Seth Pinckney to be able to pick it up down low. These guys just have not been able to deliver, and for Marshall, when you lose the likes of Tavion Kinsey, Andrew Taylor, it does cause your backcourt to be a little bit out of sorts, but Keyshawn Foles has been able to do a solid job being able to give this team going into yesterday 4 steals per contest, so I do like what he's able to bring to the table at Marshall, a team that does a relatively solid job of being able to take care of the ball, and I do think that that's going to win out against an FIU team that they do a solid job of being able to take away the ball, but they don't necessarily do a good job on the glass, jump shooting, and I do think that Marshall, being able to take away that forte of Florida National, going to win out. So I like Marshall outright on the money line, set them as a 3-point favorite, and take the over semi-total at 159. 841, 842 on the betting board. It is Akron and Utah State doing battle, with Utah State opening up a pick'em. They are now a 1-point underdog, and total on this game is 143. I think this line is moving in the correct direction. I did set Utah State as the 2.5-point underdog. With Akron, I think that it's just so paramount that they get back Ali, who was a big part of the reason why they made the NCAA tournament 2 seasons ago. He has come back in full force, but he's also come back with quite a bit of help, as you've got out there Enrique Freeman, who's been able to give you 12 points, 13 rebounds per contest. Mikal Dawson has been able to do a nice job being able to give the team right in the neighborhood of about 16 points per game as well. And while Ali waits to be able to get that waiver to be able to clear, this Akron team has way more than enough to be able to hold down the fort in the meantime, with someone like a Sammy Hunter who comes in from Ole Miss, being able to give this team some rebounding. Would be nice to be able to get him out there on the floor, but even without him, someone like Caleb Thornton being able to do a good job coming off the bench, giving this team right around 3.5 assists per contest. Even without Ali, this team has been very rock solid, being able to produce points and still just doing a really nice job in general of being able to D up and defend. They gave up 71 points yesterday against FIU, but that's one of the more up-tempo teams that you're going to find in college basketball. Utah State, with Danny Sprinkle coming in from Montana State, they have taken on that Montana State sort of way. They've been playing a little bit more slowly, much more defense-oriented, with great Osabor, who did come over with Danny Sprinkle from Montana State, really coming into his own. He's now averaging 10-plus rebounds per game. He's been able to give the team right around 21 to 22 points per contest after a season ago. I mean, he was solid. 10 points, a block, 4.5 rebounds per game, but he's really been able to take that next step. But you've got a Utah State team that they have been a little bit lax with regards to the way that they've given up some wide open 3-point looks. They do on offense have a guy in Darius Brown, the second, who's been able to do a very good job of being able to dish it out. He's been able to give just under 8 assists per contest, and when needed, he's a high 33-point shooter. He's a very unselfish guy in that he will pass up shots for himself, but you do need a bit more out of Ian Martinez as well. Comes over from Maryland, where season ago he shot 40% for 3 with 5.5 points per contest. Just is not really giving the team a whole heck of a lot here in the early going, and I think that Akron, being able to play their defense-oriented style, doing a solid job against a Utah State team that, no doubt about it, they're starting to click, especially down low, but they do leave a little bit of something to be desired in the backcourt. They're going to have a little bit of a tough time against this Akron bunch. So I did set my total at a 136.5. I'm going to be taking a look at this 143 under end with Akron, one to lay up to 2.5 with them. 843, 844 on the betting board. We head to the Sunshine Slam in Daytona Beach, Florida, as Siena and Central Michigan do battle. Central Michigan, a 2.5 to a 3-point favorite. You're total between 138.5 and 139.5. I said Siena is a 2-point favorite. I'm going to be taking them outright on the money line. For Siena, it's been a little bit rough sledding for them without Michael Ealy. I mean, maybe it's just the fact that I trust in this coaching staff and the way that they always do a great job with their next man up approach and everything like that, but I'm willing to ride with Siena. It's been less than savory for them to start the season, but Zach Tekken has been able to do a nice job, giving you 14 points, 4 assists, and has not been really bombing it from 3-point range. And Siena, just in general, I do think that they are doing for a little bit of positive shooting variance, shooting 56% free throw line, 30% from 3-point range. I do think that that should be heading northward. You've been able to get some good production with about 10 points per contest out of Giovanni Amajuru. He has come in from Sam Houston State and has been a nice impact player for this team. Now with Siena, they didn't really bring in a lot of guys via the transfer portal, but I do like what Michael Ojo has been able to give you as a freshman as well. And then on the flip side, for Central Michigan, I do feel like under the radar, Anthony Pritchard has been able to do a nice job. He comes in from Tulsa, and at Tulsa last year, he was able to dole out the ball. He's been able to give the team 16 points, 4 assists, currently shooting 45.5% from 3, and as a matter of fact, each of your top 4 scorers for Central Michigan are shooting north of 36.5% from 3. I do think that we're going to see a little bit of a downward spiral there. We've had Paul McMillan come in from NJIT, where he was a little bit of an afterthought, and he's been able to put in there 8.5 points per contest. I do like what you're able to get down low, as you've been able to get about 10.5 points, 4.5 boards out of Marquise Harding after a season ago. Gave you right around 4 boards, some relatively solid scoring, and Brian Taylor was last year the man for the team with about 16 points per contest. He's dialed it back, but still been able to give you those 6 rebounds per game. Central Michigan, though, they really don't have a lot of depth outside of that main starting 5. You can tell that Siena trying to find their bearings a little bit, but I do think that they've got some good options, and I do think that they are going to be able to find guys to be able to fill in the backcourt, and I do think that they're going to be able to overcome this Ely injury and be able to get the job done with good, tenacious defense and cut down on those 17 turnovers per contest. I did set my total at a 140. Central Michigan playing a little bit more defense-oriented, but they're a team that's willing to push the tempo a little bit, and Siena certainly has been a little bit of a work in progress on defense themselves, so going to be diving in on this total over, set it at a 140. And with Siena, I did set them as a 2-point favorites, taking them outright on the money line. 845, 846 on the betting board. Stetson and Milwaukee do battle from Ocean Center, and with Milwaukee, they are 2.5 to 3-point favorites. Totals anywhere between 150.5 and 151. I think they played in the same building for the CBI last year, and with UW Milwaukee, I think that they get the job done once again, as they did set them as 2.5-point favorites. Now that we're getting a 3, that is my buy point on Stetson, and I no doubt think that UW Green Bay is going to have the best player out there on the floor. That'd be B.J. Freeman, who has been absolutely tremendous for this team. He's been able to log 21.5 points, 7 boards, nearly 3 assists, mid-30s 3-point shooter. He has been tremendous, but Jalen Blackman on the other side is a bucket getter for Stetson as well. He's been able to log a little bit over 16 points per contest. They bring in Alec Oglesby, who a season ago, he was really a primary reserve for the team, shooting 40% from 3 off the bench. He's been able to step up in a little bit of a bigger role, and for Stetson, they do need to cut down on the turnovers. 14.5 turnovers per contest after a season ago. Stetson was really efficient on offense, shot 39% from 3 with 10.5 turnovers per game. They were direly bad on defense, but I do think that that should be a little bit better this year with Oglesby being able to hit the glass. Aubin Getstersty has been able to give you about 8 rebounds per game as well, so that has been nice. And you still have Stephon Swenson, not necessarily a primary scorer, but a guy that's able to give you 5 assists per contest. That should be able to do a good job of keeping the team very lively, along with Trenton Thompson coming over from Minnesota, where, I mean, he wasn't amazing at Minnesota, but he did see 8 starts. He's a true 7-footer that could tear it up in this sort of a league. And for UW Milwaukee, past B.J. Freeman, got a lot of question marks. Nobody else is averaging north of 8.5 points per contest. I do think we should see Kentrell pulling in some more buckets to be able to give you about 8.6 half boards this season after a season ago. Gave you more like 10.5 points on about 39% three-point shooting. Marcus Browning last season was a double-figure scorer that was able to give out 3 assists per contest, so I'm expecting a little bit more out of him. And then got the Old Dominion transfer in Faison Fields, who season ago over at ODU was able to give you 4 boards. He should be able to fortify things down low, and I do think that UW Milwaukee in the end pulls it out, but keep in mind that this is in the state of Florida. Stetson has been a little bit more off with their offense. It does feel like Green Bay has dialed it back just a little bit from their breakneck pace from a season ago, so I did set my total more in the neighborhood of a 148.5, so I'm going to be taking a look at the under, but with this UW Milwaukee team at 3 or more, that's my sell point on them. I'll take Stetson with 3 or more and taking a look at the under. 847, 848 on the betting board. UNLV is going to be playing against Florida State from Ocean Center, and Florida State is a 3.5-point favorite. And your total, that is heading between 149.5 and 150. I am right now seeing pretty much 3.5 across the board after this open up at 2.5, and that's significant because I did set my line at 3. So north of 3 is my buy point on UNLV. UNLV had that just horrible loss to Southern. I attribute that to Siena being hotter than lava and UNLV being colder than an igloo, and ever since then, UNLV has looked significantly better. They go on the road, they take down Pepperdine, they wipe out Stetson by double figures, order has been restored, and you got a very nice versatile player, Luis Rodriguez, who's able to do a very solid job after a season ago at 10.5 points, 5.5 boards, right around 1.7 steals per contest, picking up right where he left off last season. A 6'7" combo player. His biggest issue is that he's not necessarily a guy that's going to light a fire from 3-point range, but you bring in Jalen Hill, good versatility at right around 6'7", was a starter over at Oklahoma a season ago that's been able to supply 13 points per contest, and this team has much more rough and tumble down low with the Boone brothers, with Caleb Boone being your main guy, 14 points, 5 boards, a steal, 2 blocks per contest. You also saw a nice score from a season ago in Justin Webster. He came over after beginning his career over at Hawaii, career about 37.5% three-point shooter, shot 46% from distance the season ago. I think that that's going to taper off a little bit, and for Florida State, you do have to wonder when the defense is going to be getting any better for the team. All at 67 to Kennesaw State in Central Michigan, but then got completely lambasted against Florida. Got a good scorer in Darren Green Jr., who he, a season ago, was able to give you double figures, has always been a high 33-point shooter, and has been able to give the team 12.5 points per game. The one problem with him is that he really can't facilitate, and while you do have Jalen Worley to be able to help him out in the backcourt, he is not necessarily a primary scorer. He's an okay defender, but not necessarily a great defender at 6'7". He does everything okay, doesn't really do anything great, and I can't say that he does anything truly awful, but you could use a little bit more than him. You've got Cameron Fletcher, who's been able to give you about 10.5 points, few boards, but you need these guys to be able to man up a little bit more down low, as well as you just have not been able to get what you were hoping for out of Bob and Miller to this point. They bring in Josh Nickelberry, a nice knockdown scorer from the Atlantic 10, but I don't know how he translates over to the ACC, and with Isaiah Cottrell down low for UNLV as well. I think that UNLV is going to be able to hold in this game on this glass, so I did set this line at 3. Being able to get north of 3, going to be taking a look at the points with UNLV, and did set my total at 145. UNLV was one of the better teams at being able to manufacture turnovers a season ago, and for Florida State, I think that they're getting a little bit too fast for their own good. I think that UNLV going to be able to slow this game down, so going to be taking a look at the under, and I'm going to be taking a look at the points with UNLV 849, 850 on the betting board. It is Colorado and Richmond doing battle from Florida with the itsy bitsy Spiders there between 9.5 and 10-point underdogs. 145.5 to 146.5 is your total. Did set my total at a 140. I'm going in on the under. You saw Colorado play very fast in non-conference play a season ago, and then in conference they really slowed it down, and they've really been piggybacking off what they did towards the back half of last season. This team has been relatively solid on defense. They did give up 79 to UW Milwaukee, but prior to that, they'd given up a combined 120 points in the first 2 games of the season, and for Richmond, it seems a little bit all over the place with their offense. They had 2 very hot games against Siena and VMI. I chalked that up a little bit more to the competition, and for Richmond, I think that they're going to continue to cool off from averaging 6.7 turnovers at 38% three-point shooting. Jordan King, he 2 seasons ago over at ETSU, East Tennessee State, shot about 40% from 3. He's currently shooting 53% from 3 with 18 points per contest. I like the versatility of Neil Quinn. Mr. Quinn is able to give you at 7 feet tall, 12 points, 5 assists, a steal, 2 blocks, and 6.5 rebounds per game. And I do think that that's going to keep Richmond lively in this game. You've got a Colorado bunch that they just have not gotten necessarily what they were hoping for out of some of their star freshmen, as well as they were really banking on some big production out of Cody Williams, who, thus far, it's a very small sample size, 7.5 points, 4.5 boards, 3.5 assists. I was maybe expecting a little bit more, but you've had your true primary scorers from a season ago, KJ Simpson, Tristan Da Silva, but they both average 16 points per contest. They're currently combined to average about 36 points per game, but you got to figure that Colorado, who's shooting 51.7% from 3, to cool off. And if you look at the splits for Colorado over the last few seasons, they have been one of the worst cover teams away from home in all of college basketball. It's just that Colorado home and road swing that really gets them. Eddie Lampkin, he certainly does give this team quite a bit more down low, being able to give you 8 rebounds per game. I need to see it to believe it from this Colorado team on the road, though, and I do think that that offense is going to be taking a little bit of a nosedive. So I did set my line at 8. I'm going to be willing to take the 10 with Richmond. Set my total 140 as well, so also diving in on the under. 851, 852 on the betting board. It is Southern Miss at Cal State Fullerton doing battle from Jacksonville. No numbers currently up on this game, but I have my own handicap, as I did set old Southern Miss as a favorite of 3.5 points, and made my total 134.5. At 134 less, going to be taking a look at the over, and at 135 or higher, going to be diving in on the under with Southern Miss. They are still without Andre Curbelo, and at this point, hopefully they aren't putting in for a waiver, because I actually think that they're better without Andre Curbelo, because you're able to have actual functionality, and you don't have butting heads right now in the backcourt. You've got a primary scorer in Austin Crowley that I like. A season ago, he was just a rock-solid, bona fide scorer with 16 points, 2.5 assists, 4 boards per contest, picking up right where he left off a season ago. Down low for Southern Miss. They do take a little bit of a setback, but I like what Victor Iwakar is able to bring to the table. He had a relatively pedestrian performance yesterday, but all in all has been able to give you north of 5 boards and a block per contest. And for Cal State Fullerton, they are missing guys like Torrey San Antonio from a season ago, so that does affect the way that they're able to defend in the post. I like what Max Jones is able to do. He's been able to give the team above 15 points per contest. He's a high 30s three-point shooter at 6'4" that came in from Division II Tampa Bay 2 seasons ago. And then you've got someone like Dawson Carper who's able to give you about 6 rebounds per game, but you tell that this team is lacking a little bit of oomph. Vincent Lee has been able to give you some relatively solid rebounding as well, but this is just not the backcourt that they've had in past years. And though you do bring in someone like Dominic Bruton from Alcorn State, He's not necessarily that primary scorer. Has never really been a great three-point shooter. And with Southern Miss, you do have a lot of options like a Donovan Ivory that's able to give you double figures. Southern Miss also one of the better teams at being able to take the ball away in all of college basketball. Fullerton in a little bit of transition as to who's going to be bringing up the ball without Latrell Wright St in the fold as well. And for Southern Miss, they entered into yesterday shooting 23% from three. Not saying this team is an amazing three-point shooting team, but we should be seeing that go northward as well. So at a 134, let's look at the over 135 or higher to the under. With Southern Miss, one to lay up to 3 with them, 4 more taking the points with Fullerton. Back out in the state of Florida, 8:53, 8:54 on the betting board. Utah Valley and Cornell do battle. No numbers currently up on this game because both of these teams played yesterday, but that said, I've got my handicap. I set Utah Valley as a 7-point underdog and made my total to where a 148.5 or less going to be taking a look at the over, 149.5 or higher. I'm going to be taking a look at the under with Utah Valley. I do like what this team is able to do down low with Trevin Doris, the 7-footer from Utah St, who saw starts last season, coming in, being able to give the team a block per contest, but when it comes to Utah Valley, they just aren't going to be able to match up with this Cornell backcourt that just comes you with wave after wave after wave. Now, the Southern Utah transfer and Drake Allen has come in, and he's been a nice knockdown scorer for Utah Valley. Doesn't necessarily have the world's greatest three-point shooting percentage as of right now, but has been able to supply about 13 points per contest. Certainly some upside there, but when you're bringing in someone like Kamani Doty, who, he was an okay scorer over at New Orleans, but he wasn't necessarily anyone super-duper special. When you have Caleb Stone Therwell being able to give you some big minutes as well. He was over at Austin Peay the last few seasons, and once again, okay score, not anyone that's really going to be taking the top off of defense, so that's a little bit of an issue. And for Cornell, they don't have that one dude out there, but at the same time, they just have so many guys who are able to play an 8 to 9 man rotation. Guy Ragland is able to give you some boards and 10 points per contest. Chris Mannon, he a season ago was able to give you 11 points, right around 2.5 assists per game. It's never been the world's greatest three-point shooter, but that has been ascending. You got someone in Keller Boothby who 2 seasons ago shot 50% from three-point range. Cooper Norad has come in after he was an afterthought a season ago. He's shooting 44% from three-point range. It's weapon upon weapon upon weapon for Cornell. And Cornell, their main kryptonite is the fact that they do turn the ball over about 15 to 16 times per contest. They go up against a Utah Valley team that really doesn't force a lot of turnovers, so I think it's a bad matchup here. I did set this Utah Valley team as a 7-point underdog, so you need at least 7.5 points to take a shot with them. 6.5 or less willing to lay with Cornell, and at 148.5 or less, taking a look at the over 149.5 or higher. Going to be diving in on the under. 8:55, 8:56 on the betting board. It is South Dakota State going up against George Mason out there in Jacksonville. George Mason, a 2.5 point favorite. Your total is 140.5, and with George Mason, I did set them as favorites of 4 points, so I am going to be willing to lay the number with South Dakota State. They go 12 of 28 from three-point range in their game yesterday, and they lose, and this is a really good South Dakota State team. Have to be wondering how sustainable that is, doing that from one day to the next with your legs being a little bit more tired, and George Mason coming off of a complete slug against Charlotte where a grand total of 103 points were scored. But this George Mason team has good variety and they've got good range because they scored 49 points yesterday. Their previous game against Cornell, they scored 90. This is a little bit of a chameleon. You want to play slow, they'll play slow. If you want to play fast, they'll play fast, as they've got a pair of guys in Keyshawn Hall along with Amari Kelly that'll be able to give you a little bit over 16 rebounds per contest, and a do-it-all guy and Ronald Polite that I like. He's one of the mainstays from a season ago. Last year, he was able to do a nice job with about 11.5 points, 4 assists, was a decent three-point shooter. Now, yesterday he had 0 points, and that is not terrific to say the least in 22 minutes, but I do think that he's going to have a little bit more of an impact, and you've also been able to get some good three-point shooting out of Darius Maddox as well. Meanwhile, for South Dakota State, no doubt about it, this team is going to light it up from three-point range. Just under 40% is what they're shooting from distance, with Mr. Do-It-All, Zeke Mayo, being able to lead the way with about 20 points, over 6 rebounds per game. He's giving you 3+ assists per contest, shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range, but it's who's going to step up around him. As Charlie Easley, he has easily been one of the biggest contributors on the team, shooting well above 45% from three-point range. But what are you going to be able to get out of the transfer Matthew Moores, who began his career at Wisconsin? Last season, he was pretty good for the team. 6.5 points. He shot in the mid 30s from three-point range towards back half of the season. Front half, he was very, very brutal, but he just has not been able to deliver too much. A former top 250 recruit. You've also been dealing with just a few ailments in general with this team, as you haven't been able to have out there on the floor someone like a Matt Mims, who a season ago was able to give you 8 points, and 2 seasons ago shot 46% from three-point range. So that's a bit of an issue for South Dakota State. Meanwhile, George Mason, I think that they win from within, so I am willing to lay up to 4 points with George Mason. And with regards to the total, I set mine at a 144. South Dakota State very much is a team that's a little bit lax on defense. Their offense is very rock solid, but in pretty much every one of their games against a Division I foe, South Dakota State has allowed at least 80. So looking at the over and going to be taking George Mason. 857, 858 on the betting board. Charlotte and Central Florida do battle from Jacksonville. Central Florida, 3.5 point favorite. Total is 128.5. I made Central Florida 5.5 point favorite. They do get a little bit of a bump from playing in the state of Florida for one, and two, the Charlotte team, even though they got the job done against George Mason, you can tell that they are having their issues out there in the backcourt, and I do think that Central Florida is going to be able to exploit them. I think you're going to be able to get a little bit more out of Darius Johnson, who a season ago gave you 10 plus points, right around 4 assists per contest. He entered into the day yesterday with north of 4 turnovers to only about 2.7 assists per game. He has been able to clean up on those turnovers a little bit more recently, and for Johnson, not going to light it up from three-point range. He did, though, a season ago, give you 2.2 steals per game, and that's big against the Charlotte team that's all about ball control, playing slowly, even with this interim coaching regime. They still have the fundamentals that they had a season ago. You've had Igor Milicic be able to log just under 10 rebounds per contest. Lucille Patterson, Jackson Threadgill. These are a pair of guys with a combined 16 points per contest, like what they've been able to bring to the table. And Nick Graves has been really a bust-out player for this team with a little bit over 11 points per contest. He's currently shooting north of 66% from three-point range. That should be coming downward. And then for Central Florida, just have a little bit more down low with Abrim Diallo coming over from San Jose State, a 7-footer that's able to give you 5+ boards. He's able to block some shots, and Jalen Sellers might be the best overall scorer in this game. He's been able to log 20 points per game. His three-point shooting has been way off after at Ball State. Last 2 seasons shot north of 45% from three. He is below 25% from distance. That should be going northward, and I do think that for Central Florida, they're going to do a nice job, be able to force some turnovers on Charlotte. I think that this is going to be a slow and controlled game once again, as Charlotte has yet to play a game where either team has exceeded 71 points, and it's really been a slog for them. It's been a slog for everyone involved, as they have broken 62 points once this far this season. So did set my total at 125.5. Central Florida, one of the better defensive teams in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis a season ago as well. So diving under, I'm willing to lay up to 5 with Central Florida. 859, 860 on the betting board. This is a Paradise Jam from the Virgin Islands. Norfolk State and Florida Gulf Coast do battle. Florida Gulf Coast, a 6.5 point favorite, and your total, that is 144. I set Dunk City as a 4.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Norfolk State. Norfolk State in a little bit of transition, but I like the overall roster that this team has. They're pretty stout defensively with Jamari Thomas, the transfer from UNC Wilmington, really being able to take the reins, as he's been able to do a solid job with 15 points, right around 3 assists, just under 2 steals per contest, part of that Wilmington team that played slow but very, very under control a season ago. The big key for this team, what are you going to be able to get out of Alan Bentren, who's been playing college basketball since the 2018-19 season, is a career 35% three-point shooter with about 8 points per contest. This is pretty much the fourth different school that he has played for, though, as he had really his heyday when he was with Towson and had 13.5 points per game about 4 seasons ago. You don't have a ton down low for this bunch, but been able to get nearly 8 rebounds per game out of Jelani Darden. And then on the flip side for Florida Gulf Coast, they have been able to have Keyshawn Kellman, the transfer from Princeton, do a good job of being able to team up with Zach Anderson. These guys combined for about 11.5 rebounds, 25 points per contest. Kellman, a traditional back-to-the-basket guy, while Anderson shooting north of 40% from three-point range, and Isaiah Thompson has been able to do a solid job being able to give this team over the last 2 years right around 15 points per contest. Season ago, shot 37.5% from three-point range. So you've got some nice front-end weapons for this team, but they don't necessarily have a ton off their bench, as Cyrus Largie 2 seasons ago was averaging double figures. He's become an afterthought with this team, so I'm not sure why he stuck it out. You give him a little bit of credit where credit is due for doing so, because I think that a lot of guys would have transferred in. They need Daly and Johnson to be able to step up as well. Over at Penn State 2 seasons ago was actually a starter that shot in the mid-30s from three-point range. He's been able to give the team 7 points per game, but really doesn't do anything other than shoot threes. And for Norfolk State, I do like the way that they're able to defend Gilbert Brown. No, not the former Green Bay Packers, an assist-to-turnover ratio of 6. And Norfolk State doing a pretty efficient job with their defense. Meanwhile, Florida Gulf Coast, they've just had a little bit of a tough time in general finding their footing. So I'm going to be willing to take the points with Norfolk State, set this line at 4.5, and with this total, set mine at a 140.5. Florida Gulf Coast not really looking to push tempo, and Norfolk State looking to get back to their defensive roots, which led them to the NCAA tournament a few seasons ago. So diving under and going to be taking the points with Norfolk State. 861, 862 on the betting board. Hampton and San Jose State do battle from the Virgin Islands. Hampton, a 10-point underdog with your total at 145. I said Hampton as an underdog of 7 points, so I'm going to be willing to take the points with Hampton. They underachieved their first few games of the season, but it does feel like these moving pieces, and talented moving pieces at that, are starting to find themselves. Tedrick Wilcox, he's been able to log 17 points per contest after being a main scorer over at St. Francis of New York a season ago. Been able to get some nice production down low out of Kyrie Mullen, who last 2 seasons has been able to give you between 8 and 9 rebounds per game. Now, what you could use a little bit more of is consistency out of Dan Bannister Jr., who a season ago gave the team right around 5.5 points, but was a good three-point shooter at about 38% from the outside. Really was able to emerge for a Hampton team that overall shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range, but turning it over a little bit too much. And for San Jose State, they're currently without Robert Viola, their top returning rebounder from the season ago. You do have good versatility with Tibet Gronair, Trey Anderson. These guys are between 6'7" and 6'8". They've been able to log a combined 28 points, 12.5 boards. Both are shooting north of 40% from three-point range, but San Jose State over the last 3 seasons, ever since Tim Miles has taken over, it's been a bottom 50 team in terms of possessions per game, and they're turning the ball over 13.5 times per contest without necessarily getting a lot of steals themselves. Adrame Diongue has been able to come in, and he's a true 7-footer that began his career at Washington State that has been able to give the team 7 rebounds per game while Viola comes back from injury. But I do think that Kyrie Mullen going to be able to hold his own down low, and that allowed Hampton to be able to hold in this game, one that I think is going to be a little bit more of a low-scoring slog with the way that San Jose State plays. So did set my total 143, diving in on the under, and with Hampton, we'll take time with them. 863, 864 on the betting board. Kent State is going to be playing against Fordham. This is out there in the Virgin Islands, and Fordham is a 5-point underdog with your total at 139.5. I said Kent State as a 6.5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number with Kent State. They do have much more down low this season, with Chris Payton being able to give you 10-plus points, north of 8 rebounds per game. That is going to be very hard for this Fordham team to match up with Abdul Sambilia. He was a nice shot blocker a season ago that was able to give you right around 6 to 7 rebounds per game. So I do think that he's going to offset that a little bit. But this is also a Kent State team that last season they were in the top 20 in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, top 30 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And Fordham was a good defense in their own right, but they lose so much of that fulcrum from a season ago. You lose Darius Quinsberry. You lose someone like a nice versatile piece in Khalid Moore. Antrell Charlton is back from a season ago, but he doesn't look like his normal self. He's only been able to give the team about 4 points, 5 boards. He a season ago was able to give the team a little bit more facilitation as well, with right around 3.5 assists per game. So that's been an issue. Meanwhile, for Kent State, need to get Giovanni Santiago online with his 3-point shooting. Entered into yesterday, shooting 6.7% from 3-point range. So it's unsightly bad, but got Reggie Bass along with Jalen Sullinger, would able to combine for about 30.5 points per contest, both shooting north of 40% from 3-point range. And for that matter, for Kent State, entering into yesterday, 5 out of their top 7 scorers were shooting at least 40% from 3-point range. You've got some nice depth with this team, even if you have to go as far as down as Julius Rollins, who is back from a season ago. He's capable of being a nice outside shooter for his career, shooting about 35.5% from 3-point range. I think there's too many weapons on the outside for Kent State, and I do think that Fordham having to rely upon just Hoff Metter for a lot of their offense, that's a little bit of an issue. He's been able to come in from UTSA and has been much better at being able to hold the ball than he was at UTSA. He's been able to shoot about 38.5% from 3, 13.5 points per contest. You do like to see that, but without having Rodzlov Norkovsky down low to help out Zimbilia, I think that this Kent State team going to be able to hold their own on the glass and then win from the outside. Semi-total 136.5, diving in on the under. Both of these teams were in the top 40 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis last year. I'm willing to lay up to 6 with Kent State. 865, 866 on the betting board. This is from the Virgin Islands with Missouri State and Abilene Christian doing battle. Abilene Christian, an underdog of 3 points, and your total is 137.5. I think the wrong team is favored here. I said Abilene Christian as a 2-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take them outright on the money line with this Abilene Christian style. It's just so difficult to be able to match up with and just flat out prepare for it. Abilene Christian always are masters at being able to generate turnovers. We saw that yesterday against Fordham. Fordham against Abilene Christian had 19 turnovers and 16 made field goals, and you've got a little bit more of a primary scorer coming to the forefront for Abilene Christian, and Ali Abdu-Diba. He was over at Chicago State a few seasons ago, and now he's been able to give the team 13 points per contest, but it truly is a whole is greater than some of its parts sort of team. You've got Hunter Jack Madden along with Arion Simmons, who've been able to combine for about 22.5 points per contest. It's an Abilene Christian team that has always had its issues with three-point shooting about 32% from three this far this season. Emmanuel Allen, last few seasons, has shot north of 37% from three. He's been one of their primary sources of outside shooting, but Cam Steele's able to give you a few rebounds. This team, once again, much like they have the last few seasons, able to go 8+ deep, and when it comes to Missouri State, they do a good job of making things slow, yucky, what have you, but I do think that they're going to struggle with that defense, and they've been dealing with a few issues of their own with having Chase Moore dealing with a little bit of an ailment. He's missed a few games thus far this season. You do have Donovan Clay, a really nice glue guy who's been able to do a nice job, 16 points, 9 boards, and for Moore yesterday, he was able to return with 9 points. A little bit of credit there, but even with Moore in the fold, you've only got about a 7-man rotation. Caesar Edwards, he comes in from Xavier, was able to find it a little bit more yesterday, but it's been able to give you for the season right around 6 points, 3.5 rebounds per game. You'd like to see a little bit more there, as Alston Mason has had to be really their primary scorer. He had a 0 burger yesterday, but overall for the season, he's been able to do a nice job being able to lock in with just over 15 points per contest. And then you've got Matthew Lee, big part of that St. Peter's team that made the Elite 8 a few seasons ago. His career about 36% field goal shooter from 3-point range and has been able to do a solid job being able to give you in the neighborhood about 10 points per contest. But with Abilene Christian, with the way that they take away the ball and the way that both of these teams play slowly, I think every possession is going to matter, and Abilene Christian is going to take enough away to be able to get the win. I like Abilene Christian outright right on the money line. Semi-total 132, so also going under. 867, 868 on the betting board. This is a Maui Invitational from the Old Stand Sheriff Center as Tennessee and Syracuse do battle. Syracuse, a 14-point favorite with your total between 145 and 146. I do think that Tennessee should be able to get it done, and I don't doubt that they get it done by double figures. I set my line at 10.5, but like I was saying with Mike in the last segment, I think this line has gotten a little bit too lofty. I'm going to be taking the points with Syracuse. Syracuse has a nice backcourt that I do think that they're in a little bit of transition. I think that there's a little bit of talent that is yet to be tapped into, but I do like what they're able to bring to the table. You've got Judah Mintz, who's been able to do a solid job giving the team 23 points per contest, and then J.J. Starlin needs to pick it up a little bit from a scoring perspective. He's right now shooting 11% from 3-point range. I don't know if he'll ever be an amazing shooter, but he's done everything else pretty well. 6.5 boards, 4.3 assists per contest. Now, I think the big challenge for Syracuse is going to be holding up down low. You've been seeing a little bit more out of Malik Brown, the 6'8" forward that has been able to give you about 4.5 rebounds per game, and then you've been having the true 7'2", 7'4" big man and Naheem McLeod be able to give you some nice minutes as well, but his conditioning, always a little bit of a question mark, but 8 blocks in the last 2 games. And for Tennessee, Dalton Knecht is connecting from 3-point range, about 20 points per contest, exactly what the Tennessee team needed. They have been so efficient on offense, shooting 38% from distance, 82% at the free throw line, with less than 10 turnovers per game, and they're deep. You get Zakai Ziegler back, who is clearly rehabbing from injury, but has still been a good facilitator. He's done a good job on defense, and then you just have everyone out there on the floor being able to rebound. You've been able to get some good production out of Adu, who's been able to give you about 7.5 rebounds per game. Toby Awaka has been able to do a solid job with 5 boards. Josiah Jordan James, just an ultimate glue guy that'll give you 10 points, 5 boards, an assist, a steal, a block. I mean, he just does it all. So I do think the Tennessee, once again, going to be one of the top defenses in all of college basketball. They were top 3 defense in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis a season ago. And for Syracuse, they've broken the 70-point plateau in all 3 of their games. I'll give it up 70 plus, but I do think that this game gets side down a little bit more. I think that Syracuse is going to get into Tennessee just a skoge more, as Tennessee, they face quite a bit of outmatched competition, sans Wisconsin. So I do think that the Tennessee offense falls off a little bit. Certainly Syracuse is going to have a tough time with this defense as well, which is why I did set my total 136.5, diving in on the under end, being able to get 14, going to be taking those points with Syracuse. 869, 870 on the betting board. Gonzaga and Purdue do battle from the Sand Sheriff Center. This opened up, as I was talking about, with Purdue being a 3-point favorite. Mentioned that with Mike, and I know he wishes that was the number out there in the northeast part of the country. As right now, pretty much we're finding 4 to 4.5 across the board. Total on this game, you're finding it in the neighborhood about 154.5 to 155.5. At a 4, I'd still be willing to lay it with Purdue. I set this line at 4.5 personally. I got in early back when you were seeing most books were listing this more in that 3.5 range. You were able to find at best at 3, at worst about a 4 to a 4.5. So I would rather lay 4 than take 5 as well. So just for a little bit of context there. But with Purdue, I do think that they should be able to win the battle down low. You've got Zach Edey, the National Player of the Year from a season ago, and then Fletcher Lawyer, Braden Smith, maybe able to take that nice year 1 to year 2 leap. You've got Smith, who was just a little bit of a do-it-all guy a season ago. Lawyer was a little bit more of a just primary scorer, and Smith, he's been able to give you 8+ assists per contest. You've got Lawyer right now. It's giving you about 8.5 points per contest, but has been efficient, shooting north of 41% from 3-point range. Purdue is going to see a dip in their 3-point shooting percentage. They're shooting about 46.3% from 3-point range. That's just not realistic, but you've got Lance Jones in the fold along with Miles Colvin. Both of these guys are giving you right around 8 points per contest. I could see some production from Trey Kaufman-Renn as well. And then on the flip side for Gonzaga, I think the real question is, what are you going to be able to get moving forward out of the man that was gone all of last year in Graham Ike, who in 2 games has looked relatively solid. 18 points, 7 boards. I don't know if he quite looks to be peak Graham Ike, but he's looked relatively good thus far. And you've actually gotten 42 points out of Braden Elf thus far, the 6'10" gentleman from the great state of Illinois. I don't think that is going to be long lasting, as he had 23 points in 14 minutes in that game against Eastern Oregon, but I mean, that has been a wonder to take a look at. I do think that Ryan Nembhard being able to elevate this offense in terms of his facilitation is relatively big as well, and I do think that Gonzaga does a good job in the backcourt, and then you got Mr. Do-It-All and Anton Watson, so that is a big reason why I did set my line at a 4.5, and I do think that for Gonzaga, they're going to be able to get this a little bit more up-tempo, but we have seen Gonzaga typically when they play a team like St. Mary's, they do fall into line a little bit more. This is a Purdue offense that is much better than it was a season ago, but Purdue's still not a team that is necessarily going to be running it and gunning it or anything like that, so I do think we went a little bit too far with this total. I set my total at 154.5, diving down on the under, and at a 4 or less, willing to lay it with Purdue. Like I said, would rather lay 4 than take 5 with Gonzaga, with making my number 4.5. 871, 872 is a game that's off the board, but we should get numbers on this one. This is one like the only D1 versus non-D1 games you're going to get a line on all season. It's Kansas and Chaminade. No numbers up on this game. Not going to be the most in-depth insight in the world because I set Kansas as a 53-point favorite. And, I mean, good grief. You've got a Chaminade team that, for Division II standards, they're really not the world's greatest team. And, I mean, you hope for nothing but the best for Chaminade. These are hardworking kids, and you know that they're going to be going pro in something other than sports. They bring in Alec Peterson from the country of Australia. He should be able to elevate the guard play a little bit for this team. Wyatt Lowell is someone who began his career at the University of Portland. He's 6'9", and while he was at Portland, I mean, he was an okay player. Actually began his career at BYU as well. Like at Portland a season ago, he was able to give you about 4.5 points, 4 boards. He's able to go and he's able to give you a little bit of versatility, shooting north of 35% from 3-point range. So I actually think that he's going to be a solid player, but I mean, let's call it what it is. You've got one of the best teams in all of college basketball going up against a Chaminade team that a season ago at the Division II level went 14-15. what are we expecting here? Like, you take a look at the exhibition matchup results that we saw a season ago. They got blown out by Cincinnati, 98-55. They lost 101-57 against Ohio State. They actually hung in there against Louisville, which that speaks of what Louisville is. But yeah, this is, I think, going to be just a complete and utter butt kicking. Like, the only way that I think Chaminade stays within 50 is if Kansas just in the final 10 minutes puts in their Walkie McWalk-on Jr. and everything like that, which, I mean, it's a possibility, but Hunter Dickinson in like 20 minutes of work could be able to give you 20 and 15. And I'm not even kidding when I say that. You've got just all sorts of versatility with Juwan Harris in the backcourt. He does such a good job of being able to dish out the ball, being really efficient with it. I know that you've got a few question marks with what are you going to be able to get out of someone like a Nicholas Timberlake who comes up to the Division I level. I've had my question marks with someone like a Parker Brown as well, but still this Kansas team just completely outclasses Chaminade. I think that this turns into a little bit more of an open gym, up and down situation in the second half. So my handicap is Kansas laying 53 points, and at a 154.5 or less, looking at the over 155.5 or higher to the under. 873, 874 on the betting board. Marquette and UCLA do battle. UCLA is an underdog of 5.5 points. Your total is 138 to 138.5. I know that Mike was mentioning this game a little bit before. I don't want to be going north of 5.5, but I'm willing to lay 5.5. I set my number at 6 with UCLA. They are very much a work-in-progress team. They were able to take it to the likes of St. Francis of Pennsylvania and company, but they really made a Sherman-soft schedule for them to begin the season because you've got a lot of moving parts. Adam Bona is relatively solid down low. He's able to give this UCLA team 18 points, right around 8.5 rebounds per game. He's a good shot blocker as well, and that's going to be a little bit of an issue for a Marquette team that a season ago they were outside the top 300 in terms of rebound rate, but if Eduardo Godero really be able to step up in the post, 13 points, 8 boards, he's able to give you a few assists. Not a guy that's going to let it fly from 3. And for Marquette, overall this season, shooting 37.5% from distance. Tyler Kolek was dealing with a little bit of an injury to begin the season, but he proved in that game against Illinois he's looking just fine. He had 24 points, 6 boards, 4 assists, so he is all good to go. And then even the ancillary pieces like a Stevie Mitchell, a Sean Jones, these have been guys that have been able to give you right around 5 to 6 points per contest. You've got David Joplin, who's able to come in off the bench, shoot it very well from 3-point range. And for UCLA, I think that there's a lot of TBDs with regards to the backcourt. Dylan Andrews, I mean, he was missing from the team's game in the last one. I don't know whether that was for injuries. Maybe he was disciplined by the team, but that's a little bit of a question mark. You've got 7'3" Ade Mara, who, I mean, he's got a lot of upside, but at the same time, it just feels like he's a very raw player in general. Laser Stefanovic is able to light it up from 3-point range, but for this UCLA team, currently shooting 24% from 3. I do think that that certainly goes northward in this game, which is a big reason why I did set my total at a 144. You do have a Marquette team that's looking to go up and down. They are very much an offense-oriented team, which the defense sometimes does elude them a little bit more. And for UCLA, they certainly have been priding themselves on defense, but I just don't think that the defense is quite there for them as well. So willing to lay up to 5.5 with Marquette. I think that this game has the possibility of being close enough for late game following. So also taking a look at that angle with this over to go along with Marquette. 875, 876 on the betting board. It is Cal State Bakersfield. Meet me for the Roadrunners as they play against Sacramento St. This is a part of the SoCal Challenge. With Sacramento St, they're between 2.5 and 3-point favorites. And your total on this game is saying between 133.5 and 134. I did set the Roadrunners as a favorite of 1.5 points, so I'm going to be looking at them outright on the money line. David Patrick is a coach I really do like over at Sacramento State, but he just really doesn't have a lot of pieces I like, and the low post rotations for the Sacramento State team have been fascinating, to say the least, because Colin Wayne was quite solid for this team a season ago. Gave the team 9.5 points, 6 boards, a block per contest, and he has been the equivalent of Bigfoot in their games. Nobody's been seeing him because he's playing 11.5 minutes per game, and I don't know why. They do bring in someone that I like in Duncan Powell, Boom Boom Powell, who comes in from North Carolina A&T, was a primary reserve for them, was able to log about 8.6 boards, and he's averaging a double-double right now for Sacramento State, which has been solid, but I feel like they're investing a little bit too much in a backcourt that is questionable. Brandon Betson, he comes in from Tulsa, where he shot about 40% from 3, 10 points per contest. that hasn't necessarily translated to this team, and you don't necessarily have a primary point guard. You do have someone in Z Hamoda who comes in from Utah State, was able to give Utah State about 4.5 points, shot in the high 30s from three-point range. Not a primary point guard. Austin Patterson, he's a good shooter. He's not a primary point guard, and that, I think, is going to be the death nail for Sacramento State in this game, because you've got Caleb Higgins, who's able to be that primary guy for this Cal State Bakersfield team. A season ago, prior to going down with injury after 13 games, at 13 points, 4 assists, a steal, didn't turn it over like fly. Now he's up to 20 points, 3.5 assists, turnovers. They're a little bit high, a little bit of that. It's because they have played some very good competition, but he's got some good help down low. Modestus Concretes along with Francisco Okerke. Both of these guys have been able to combine for in the neighborhood about 9.5 rebounds per game. Concretes, he's someone that comes in from Creighton, was a former top 150 recruit that's able to let it fly from three-point range. It's been struggling a little bit there in Bakersfield. They're currently shooting 25% from three-point range. I think that should be going northward, along with Cameron Wilbon, who does come in from Sacramento State, being able to give the team a little bit of a lift as well. Wilbon, a season ago, he was able to give you about 8.5 points, 4 boards, a pair of assists per contest. So I like what he's able to bring to the table. I think that you've got more versatility with his Bakersfield team, a team that does a very good job of being able to rebound by committee, and I think that that's going to get the job done. What I think is going to be a slow and grimy game between two teams that were outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game a season ago, and really had a tough time dialing it in on the offensive side of things. So semi-total 131.5, diving in on the under and taking Bakersfield outright on the money line. 877, 878 on the betting board. Tarleton State is going to be playing against Austin Peay. This is also out there in California, as Tarleton State is a favorite of 1.5 to 2 points. Their total is between 138 and 138.5. With Austin Peay, I did set them as underdogs of 2 points. At the 1.5 that I'm seeing, I'm going to be willing to lay it with Tarleton State. I really do like this Austin Peay team. They did a nice job with Corey Gibson being able to maintain, happy in general with the guys that he brought in via the transfer portal. And the guys that he brought in via the transfer portal were guys that were playing from last season over at Northwestern State. The likes of Jamonta Black, DeMarcus Sharp, guys that were very good from three-point range. And DeMarcus Sharp is going to see a rise in his three-point shooting. Last year shot 54.5% from three-point range. This year he has yet to make a three, so that is certainly going to be going northward. But Sharp, even with that, 15.5 points, 3.5 steals, 5.8 assists, 9.8 rebounds per game, 1.3 blocks per contest. He has been stuffing the stat sheet for this team. You get a little bit more down low as well, as Daniel Luce, who comes in from the non-Division I level. I think that he's of relation to the Luce that used to coach this Austin Peay program. He's been able to give you 5 rebounds per game. You've been able to get some nice production as well, with about 14 points per contest out of Des White as well. The true freshman has come in from the state of Missouri, and he has been tremendous. Gibson using his connections to that area, and working out very well. Meanwhile, for Tarleton State, the reason why I did set them as a favorite, they just have such a tough system to be able to prepare for because they generate so many steals. I mean, just out of Skip to my Lou Williams along Jakari Smith, these two guys alone are averaging 4.8 steals per contest. Now, Tarleton State needs to do a better job taking care of the ball as well. They're turning it over 17 times per contest, but you've got a just system in general that does a great job of being able to come up with those steals. Devon Barnes has come in from the non-Division I level. He's been able to do a nice job being able to give you 11 points per contest. This is a pretty deep team in which they're going to be using like 9 guys in their rotation. If you can maybe get a little bit of something out of the non-D1 transfer, Miles Lewis, I think that you're really cooking with some gas with this Tarleton State team. And I do think that with Tarleton State, they should do a good job of turning it over for an Austin Peay team that they themselves have been averaging about 11.5 steals per contest. They're only turning it over 9.5 times per game, but keep in mind Austin Peay has played a few non-D1 teams to really bolster their numbers, and against D1 competition, they're currently averaging less than 55 points per game. So that does need to be thrown in there. I did set my total at a 138. Here at a 138.5, it is my buy point on the under. I'm willing to lay up to 1.5 with Tarleton State. 879, 880 on the betting board. Bradley and Tulane do battle from California. Tulane is an underdog of 1 to 1.5 points. Your total is 146. I set Bradley as 1.5 point favorites. Seeing a lot of ones out there, and 1 is pretty much a max I'm willing to lay. These are two pretty equal teams in my opinion, but I give the edge to Bradley because I do think that with Bradley, they're going to be able to do a relatively solid job down low. And with Tulane, I still do have my question marks in terms of depth with this team as well. You had last year the Jalen Cook, Jalen Forbes, with Cook now being out of the fold, sitting out for LSU this year. That does leave this team a little bit hampered, though Kevin Cross has been doing it all for this team. 19 points, 8.5 boards, 4.5 assists, a steal, 1.7 blocks per contest while shooting 50% from three-point range. It's absolutely ridiculous. And then Jalen Forbes, last year shot 39% from three with 18.5 points, 5 boards, and 2 steals per game. A little bit of slow going, getting out of the gates with 20 points in his first 2 contests, but I think that that'll come along for the ride. Tulane is a team that they run it, they gun it, they rip it down your throat. They are one of the fastest teams in all of college basketball. And they've got a little bit of rebounding help with Greg Glenn coming in from Michigan after he was an afterthought in that program the last few seasons. But for Bradley, this is just such a well put together system with a versatile guy, Malevi Leons, who at 6'9" is able to let it fly from three-point range. Last year sunk about 35.5% of his triples with 11 points, 6 boards, and he's been even better this year. He's actually facilitating a little bit more this year as opposed to a season ago as well. And then you've got Duke Dean, who's able to give you like 3 assists per game. Not a super primary scorer, but he's able to get Connor Hickman involved, who's able to give you double figures. Darius Hannah, after he has been a little bit up and down throughout his Bradley career last year as a reserve, was able to give the team about 6 points, 3.5 rebounds per game. He has been able to do a tremendous job down low as he's averaging a little bit north of 2.3 blocks per contest as well. Bradley, one of the toughest teams to score on in all of college basketball. They don't necessarily have stars outside of Leon's, but the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. I think Bradley slows this game down and they get the job done. I am willing to take Bradley. I'm willing to lay up to 1 with them. And did set my total at 145.5. I think that this is going to be a close game decided at the foul line. And I do think that Tulane still going to find a way to be able to get some points up on the board. I think that they're going to be looking to the 3 ball to help out with that, with Zion James being an A stat sheet stuffer as well. That's able to give you 10 plus points, is able to give you some solid boards as well. So going to be taking a look at the under and Bradley laying 1. This is going to be the DK Network write-up pick. 881, 882. It is UTEP and Cal doing battle from San Juan Capistrano, California. I completely screwed up the last part of that, but I said it is Cal and UTEP, with UTEP being a 2 to 2.5 point favorite, and your total between 142.5 and 143.5. And my DK Network write-up pick, Cal on the money line. I might need to put in there the points if we don't have money lines available at the time of publish, which would just put me on Cal like +2, +2.5. But either way, I like Cal in this spot. I set Cal as a 4.5 point favorite. I think that the addition of Jalen Tyson is so big. He was denied his waiver to begin the season. He has been back for 3 games, and in the 3 games that he has been back for, this guy is just pulverizing teams as he's been able to put in there 20 points, 7.3 boards, 4 assists, 1.7 steals per contest. And the big key here, can Mark Madsen, who did such a good job of coaching at Utah Valley a few seasons ago, unlock Fardaws Amick, who can completely wreck shop in this game? Fardaws Amick, when he last played for Mark Madsen during the 2021-22 season, he logged 18.9 points, 13.6 rebounds, 1.3 blocks on 43.5% three-point shooting at 6'11". UTEP has absolutely nothing to guard against that. Now, for UTEP, thus far this season, overall they're shooting 36% from 3. If you look at their numbers against D1 competition, 28.6% from 3. I look at those numbers much more because UTEP last season was 356 out of 363 D1 teams in three-point shooting percentage. You've had Zid Boom Boom Powell, Lonte Hardy be able to combine for about 30 points per contest. They're doing a good job of being able to dish it out, but they've got some turnover woes themselves. And with UTEP, they made games super duper just gross a season ago because they would have like 14 turnovers themselves, but they were a top 30 team last season in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They're doing that once again this season, but I think that they're going to have a tough time down low. You do have Calvin Solomon, the Stone Cold Stephen F. Austin transfer, who's been able to give the team right around 9.5 points, 5.5 boards per contest. He was able to give them 6 rebounds per game at 6'7" a season ago. But for Cal, even though I think that they're going to have a few more turnovers than normal in this game, they've done a relatively solid job of taking care of the ball, which is a surprise when you do have a little bit of a new look backcourt. You do have Jalen Sestine along with Devin Askew back from season ago. These 2 guys are able to bring up the ball, with Askew being able to give you 3 assists. The turnovers are a little bit unsightly, but a former top 75 recruit that I do think has some untapped potential I do also think that you're going to be able to get some good production out of Jalen Cone as well. A little bit of a ball hog, so I do think that he needs to fall in line with the system a little bit more, but at Northern Arizona season to go, 17.5 points on 40% three-point shooting. I think that Cal just has too many weapons. I do think that UTEP, they're going to be able to force a few steals in this one, but Cal, I think, takes care of the ball. I think they take care of business down low, and Jalen Tyson's the best player out there on the floor. My DK Network right up pick, that is on Cal. Whether that be money line or taking the points, that's based on whether or not I have a money line price in the AM. Personally, I will be with my personal bet taking the money line, but like I said, one way or another, I will be on Cal with the write up, and with this total, did set mine at a 136.5. I'm going to be diving in on the under, as keep in mind, this is going to be a game that tips off after midnight Eastern time, so also a body clock game for UTEP. 883, 884 on the betting board. Louisville and Indiana do battle from Madison Square Garden. This is a game that is currently off the board, but I've got my handicap as I said Louisville is a 13.5 point underdog, and maybe my total to where a 141 or less. I'm looking at the over. A 142 or higher, I'm looking at the under. For Louisville, give them a little bit of credit. They were fighting very hard against Texas yesterday. Now, Texas went 2 of 17 from three-point range, and Louisville went 7 of 16 from three-point range with Sky Clark all of a sudden looking very, very good with 20 points, going 4 of 6 from 3, only 2 turnovers. I do think that that is going to be drying up a little bit, as I don't think that you're going to be able to duplicate that, but I do like what Brendan Hundley Hetfield has been able to do down low for Louisville. He has been able to give them a double-figure amount of rebounds, and that is going to be the biggest thing for Indiana to control against. But the one thing that Indiana has, it's a lot of depth in terms of their low-post play. Now, they're not necessarily playing the best together, as Malik Renew has become a nice offensive piece. 15 points, 4 assists, 5.5 rebounds, a little bit over a block per contest, while Khalil Ware has been a little bit more of a defense-oriented guy, averaging a double-double with a pair of blocks per contest, but just they aren't fitting together. And Mackenzie Mbakpo, the top 25 recruit, he just looks lost out there right now. But for Indiana, you also do have Xavier Johnson, who's done a good job throughout his career decreasing the turnovers. 1.7 turnovers, 14 points per game. He's only giving out about 2.5 assists per contest, while Trey Galloway is actually leading the team in assists, but you're not getting a lot outside of really your main 6 right now. It's Gabe Cupps and company. Just has not been able to do a whole heck of a lot. But for Louisville, it's not like they've got a lot off the bench. Sans J.J. Traynor as well. You've got a lot of questionable pieces, to say the least. Trey White is someone that is very streaky with his three-point shooting as well, and I think that after Louisville was able to light it up on Sunday, I think Monday they come back to reality. I'm willing to lay up to 13 with Indiana, 14 or more, taking the points with Louisville, and then 141 or less, looking over 142 or higher to the under. 885, 886 on the betting board. Another game that's off the board. UConn and Texas do battle from MSG. This game is, like I said, currently off the board, but with this UConn team, I did set them as a 6-point favorite. I am going to be willing to lay up to 5.5 with them. With Texas, I need at least a 6.5 to be able to take a shot with them. And then with this total, 141.5 or less, looking at the over, 142.5 or higher, going to be taking a look at the under. This is a number that, especially if we get a little bit more injury information as well, I might be willing to put as high as UConn being a 6.5 point favorite, because we did see Tyrese Hunter get a little bit banged up in the game yesterday, so I actually lean a little bit more to a 6.5 as well in terms of my UConn spread, so I might be willing to lay up to 6 when it's all said and done on this one. With UConn, you've got Donovan Clingan down low. He was dealing with a little bit of an injury to begin the season as well, but I mean, he has been rock solid, and Tristan Newton just looking like a complete Sachi suffer right now for this UConn bunch. He's able to give you about 17 points. He's shipping in there about 8 boards. He's been giving out north of 4 assists per contest, shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range. There's nothing he's not doing, but I think that Texas is going to give a better effort than what they did yesterday. I don't think that you want to be too much of a prisoner of the moment. Going into yesterday, you had Tyrese Hunter, Ithiel Horton, along with Max Acemans. I'll give you between 14 and 15 points per contest with this trio being able to combine for about 11 to 11.5 assists per game. Now, the turnovers have been a little bit rough for Texas. Entering into yesterday, 16.3 turnovers per game, and that was not necessarily against the world's greatest competition. Caden Shedrick is clearly playing a little bit wounded out there as well, but even someone like a Chondell Weaver is able to step up in the backcourt. He's going to probably need to if the Hunter-inch shoe is something more than what we might be expecting. And you do have Brock Cunningham, who's got good versatility. He's able to dole out the ball. He's able to give you a steal or two at 6'6". He just does a little bit of everything for this team. But this UConn team, they have covered pretty much every one of their games in which the line has been less than minus 35 since the beginning of last season out of conference. So I do think that it's going to be a tough test for Texas. I'm willing to lay up to 6 now with UConn just because I don't think that Hunter is going to be 100%. So 6 or less, willing to lay with UConn, 7 or more. Going to be taking a look at Texas at 142 or less, looking over 143 or higher to the under 887, 888 on the betting board. Wisconsin and Virginia do battle. This is from Old Fort Myers with Wisconsin, a 2.5 point underdog. Your total is 127.5 to 128. I said Virginia is 4-point favorites. I'm going to be willing to lay this number with Virginia. I think that they're just in advanced form of Wisconsin, with Wisconsin gotten good production out of A.J. Storr. He has been an integral part of this team to begin the season, giving you about 15.5 points per contest. He will shoot better than 23.5% from 3. Last year shot 40% from 3-point range, and I don't know if he's able to duplicate what he did over at St. John's this season going. For Wisconsin, they're a better shooting team than 29% from distance, but if you look at their road and neutral court games from a season ago, they did only shoot about 32% from 3-point range. You've gotten a big, giant nothing burger out of Connor Essegian, who was such a good performer for Wisconsin a season ago. You've got Stephen Krull, Tyler Wall, a pair of guys that stand north of 6'8" that are able to dole out the ball a little bit as big men. They've both been able to give you about 10.5 points. Krull about 6.5 rebounds per game, and Krull is able to let it fly from 3, doesn't necessarily hit a lot of those threes, and then Chucky Epern is just all over the place. He'll either give you 25 points on a really efficient performance, or he'll give you 3 on a stink burger. Meanwhile, with Virginia, you've got much more consistency with this team. Reese Beekman values the ball. 5.8 assists to a turnover per contest with 10.5 points per contest. Virginia as a whole, shooting about 40.5% from 3. I do think that is going to be going downward, and a little bit of a concern for Virginia, much like last year when they shot 70% at the free throw line. Not great at the charity stripe. They're only shooting about 65% there as well, but you bring in Andrew Rohde. He comes in from St. Thomas. He's been able to give you about 6.5 points, 3 assists per contest. He's been a nice ancillary piece for Reese Beekman, much like last season. You had Reese Beekman and Kie Clark playing in concert. You've got also some really nice production out of Ryan Dunn, 6'8", do a little bit of everything guy that has been able to step up with about 7.5 rebounds per game, as this Virginia team is a little bit undersized. Jacob Groves has some versatility at 6'9", is able to let it fly from 3 with 10 points per contest, and I do think that Virginia is just in general a deep team and should be able to take it to Wisconsin. I did set this line at 4, so wanted to lay it with Virginia. Set this total at 124. You got 2 of the perennially slowest teams in all of college basketball, and for Virginia, they did give up that 70 spot against Florida ever since then. They pounded it in their skulls, so really not allow any sort of scoring whatsoever. So diving in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay it with Virginia. This last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit the extra games, 889, 890. It is SMU and West Virginia doing battle from Fort Myers, with West Virginia an underdog of between 1.5 to 2.5 points. Totals between 143 and 143.5. I set West Virginia as 3.5 point favorites. I'm going to be willing to take them out right on the money line. Fully recognize that without Kirk Creesa once again in this game, but I just haven't really liked what I've seen out of SMU. I thought that this team was going to be able to take some strides forward. As of right now, that just has not happened for them, as you've got Chuck Harris, who's been able to log 14 points per contest. You've got the Van Wilder of college basketball, Samuel Williamson, who's been giving you about 7 points, 7 boards. SMU shooting about 30.5% per 3, picking up right where they left off season ago. They've cut down on the turnovers a little bit, and you've been able to get a little bit over 10 points per contest from a little bit of an upside guy in Tariq Smith, but all in all, been a little bit off put by this team. BJ Edwards is someone that comes in after he was at Tennessee a season ago, and he hasn't necessarily delivered a ton as well. And then for West Virginia, got Quinn Slezicki, who's been a very nice, just in and out sort of player. 6'9", is able to give you 3 assists, 17 points per contest, currently shooting 50% from 3-point range. West Virginia very much dealing with depth issues, and that is going to get to them later on, probably in this tournament and overall for the season. But Jesse Edwards is going to be the best low post player in this game, averaging a double-double, 14.5 points, 10.7 boards, a little bit over a block per contest. Under the radar, Josiah Harris was able to have some moments last season in his very limited amount of play. He stepped up as a 6'7", little bit of a combo player that's able to shoot threes, and many people won't know this. Seth Wilson, among qualifying players, had the best assist-to-turnover ratio of any player in college basketball season ago. He's up to 7 points, a little bit over a steal per contest, shooting in the high 30s from 3-point range. SMU just really doesn't have a lot of firepower from the outside. West Virginia, very much a work in progress, going through just all sorts of issues in general of their own, but I do think they get the job done in this one. I set West Virginia as a 3.5-point favorite, taking them outright on the money line. I do think that Jesse Edwards owns the paint, and I think that both teams have a tough time knocking down shots. So taking a look at the under, set my total at 139.5. Now let's hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-599, 306-600. You've got Northeastern, and they're going to be playing against Kennesaw State. We give our own to Lane Kiffin. Go Owls, as this is a pick'em game with a total of 142.5 and set my total at 143, but Kennesaw State I set as a 3-point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to ride with the Owls. Kennesaw State does lose quite a bit from a season ago, but they do retain their main point guard, Terrell Burton, who season ago he was rock solid with 4 assists to about 2.8 turnovers per contest, shot in the mid-30s from 3-point range. He's done a nice job of being able to dole it out this season, and for Northeastern, they just don't have that guy. They bring in Lucas Okota. He began his career over at Harvard, was a part-time starter a season ago, and 2 years ago at Harvard, was able to give the team 36% three-point shooting, was able to put in there 11.5 points per contest, has never really been a trigger man or any sort of a floor general at 6'6". Joe Pridgeon, he's looking to get back to what he was when he was in the Patriot League, that 2019-20 season at 17.5 points, shot 43% from 3, 7 boards per contest. He's dealt with injuries ever since then, has never really been able to untap that potential ever since then. And for this Northeastern team, they're slow, they're somewhat inefficient with about 12 turnovers per contest. And other than Chris Doherty, who comes in from Notre Dame, he's been able to give the team about 7.5 rebounds per game. You don't have a lot of rebounding, while Kennesaw State is getting right now a double-double from Demon Robinson. Robinson right now giving you just under 10.5 rebounds per contest, chipping in there 11 points per game. Not a guy that's going to be versatile and pop threes, but you've got plenty of guys that are able to shoot those threes. You even have a little bit of a holdover from the last few seasons in Cole LaRue, who has been a relatively solid scorer, shot 40% from 3-point range this season ago. You're getting a little bit over 11 points per game out of RJ Johnson going into yesterday, where he had a little bit of a rough one a day ago, but all in all, he's coming as a freshman. He's giving the team some nice pop in the backcourt as well. So I do think that Kennesaw State deep enough to be able to get it done, and I do think that this is going to be a game that involves a little bit of late game fouling, and Kennesaw State, a bit more of an up-tempo team. I don't think that they're up-tempo to the point where both teams get to 90 like their game a day ago, but that said, did set my total at a 143 looking at the overhead, taking Kennesaw State on this pick'em line. 306-601, 306-602. Morehead State is on the road facing off against Bellarmine. Bellarmine is a favorite of between 4.5 and 5 points. Totals between 139 and 139.5. I disagree. I set Morehead State as a 1-point favorite. I'm going to be taking Morehead State outright on the money line. Without Mark Freeman, it's been a little bit of a transitionary period for Morehead State, but you do have Riley Minix, who's able to do a nice job of being able to be a 6'7", do-it-all sort of player coming in from the non-Division I level. He's been able to log 16 points, a block and a half, a steal and a half, 7 rebounds per game. Able to pop threes, has not necessarily popped them very well this far this season, but you do have Drew Thelwell in the backcourt that's able to do so. He shot 38% from 3 a season ago, 36.5% from distance this season. Is a little bit inconsistent with his scoring, but is able to do a nice job dishing out the ball for Bellarmine. This just doesn't feel like the same Bellarmine team from the past few seasons. You've got Peter Suter along with Bash Weiland, who have been able to combine for 22 points per contest. With Suter, he's able to give you a trio of assists per game, but the team always struggles on the glass. He's been able to get about 5.5 rebounds per game out of Alec Ferrum, so he's been able to lend a little bit there, and you've been able to get 14 points per contest out of Ben Johnson, who a season ago, Mr. Johnson, in a primarily six-man role, was able to shoot about 39% from 3-point range, but not having some of that grizzled veteran leadership like they had a season ago, as Justin Betts was a guy that was able to lead the team in rebounds and assists, I do think hurts this team. And for Morehead State, even though they are trying to pick up the pieces from not having out there their main scorer from a season ago in Freeman, they've had Jordan Lathan, who's been well-traveled, be able to step up in the backcourt. Khalil Thomas is able to give you some rebounds at 6'5". He's been shooting north of 40% from 3-point range. Morehead State needs to take care of the turnovers, but they play a Bellarmine team that doesn't force a lot of steals. So, set Morehead State as a favorite. I'm taking them outright on the money line. Somebody told 133. Morehead State, one of the slower teams in all of college basketball. Bellarmine, they play at a brutally slow pace. So, looking at the under and looking at Morehead State outright on the money line. 306-603, 306-604. Bryant is going to be playing us Howard. Howard between a 4 to a 5 point underdog with your total between 156.5 and 157.5. I set Bryant as a 4.5 point favorite, mostly seeing 4s, and personally I would rather lay 4 than take a 5 with Bryant. It just feels like they're coming out with a little bit more enthusiasm ever since Phil Martelli Jr. took over the program. They are coming off that massive win against Florida Atlantic, so you do have to wonder how they're going to be handling Prosperity, but these are not lowly touted guys that they brought in. Like Sharif Gross-Bullock is someone that began his career in the Atlantic 10 over at LaSalle. Earl Timberlake played some time over at Miami, I believe it was. I think that he might have actually spent a year at Memphis as well. Like, these are guys that they transferred in from power conference schools. So these guys are used to being able to pull off those sorts of wins. You've got the St. John's transfer and Rafael Pinzon, who has really been able to do a solid job after he was a nice sharpshooter over at St. John's last 2 seasons, shooting 43% from 3, 13.5 points per contest. And I do think that with having Martelli now in the fold, he's going to go a little bit more into this bench. You saw guys like Miles Lattimore, Connor Withers, Doug Eater get a very small amount of minutes, and it does feel like he's looking to play a little bit more of a 7 to 8 man rotation. Meanwhile, with Howard, you've got Bryce Harris, who's been terrific for the team, 17 points, 6.5 boards, and it's a Howard team that they're looking to push tempo, and they're looking to push tempo in a big way. Last season in conference, they were a top 20 team in terms of total possessions per game, and Bryant, under the tutelage of Jared Grasso, they are really looking to play up tempo. Bryant has very much slowed down this year. They're more around 134th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. So I do think that the scoring is going to be died down a little bit from what we've seen in past Bryant games and the past few seasons from them. And you have a Howard team that's incredibly sloppy with 17.5 turnovers per contest. You got Shai Odom, Seth Towns, pair of guys that are combining for about 22 points per contest. They've got some versatility and are able to pop threes, but I do think that for Bryant, they've got enough weapons to be able to get the job done from the backcourt. So with this line at a 4 or less, I'm going to be willing to lay it with Bryant, and with this total, set mine at a 150.5, so diving under 306, 605, 306, 606. St. Peter's is playing us UMass Lowell. UMass Lowell is between a 4.5 to a 5 point favorite. Your total, that is between 130 and 130.5. Saw an opening of 131.5. This has come down a little bit, and I disagree with it. I set my total at a 140 because while UMass Lowell is a very good defense-oriented team, they are a team that does look to push quite a bit of tempo, and they're able to have a Yinde Akeem be able to give you a good performance on any given night. So I'm going to be taking a look at the over. With Akeem, he's been able to log about 20 points. He's been able to give out 5 assists. Has been turning the ball over a little bit, and with the St. Peter's team, you never know what you're going to get from them on offense, but they've been a little bit improved this year. 70-plus points at each of their last 2 contests with St. Peter's. This is not a team that's going to completely light you up from 3-point range, shooting 39.5% from the floor. 13.7 turnovers per game is a little bit of an issue, but you've got versatility with 6'3" Latrell Reed. Reed, a season ago, gave the team about 5.5 points, 4.5 boards, 3.5 assists per contest. He's now up to 10 points per contest with about 4 boards, 5 assists, like what he's been able to do. And then you've had the junior college transfer, Michael Hoagie, really be able to step up with 13 points per game, and he's been able to do a good job giving the team a little bit more on glass, as St. Peter's looking to be more of a low and slow team, but they didn't have a lot of size along with Mohamed Sow a season ago, and they're going to have a tough time with Abdul Kareem Kulapali, who began his career at Pittsburgh. He a season ago logged 11.5 points, 7.5 boards, a block per contest, and then you've got Max Brooks, who's able to give you a block plus per contest, able to do a good job on the glass. Yuri Covington is a nice off-the-ball player that's able to shoot it well from 3, and I mean, UMass Lowell, right now shooting only about 30% from 3. That'll be going northward. I think they take it to St. Peter's, set my total at 140. I think that UMass Lowell gets things a little bit more up-tempo, and I think that you have a late-game felling up with this total as well. So looking over and looking to lay 5.5 or less with UMass Lowell. 306, 607, 306, 608. NJIT plays host to Delaware St. Delaware St is an underdog. 1.5 to 2 points. Your total is between 143 and 143.5. I made NJIT a 5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number with NJIT. Certainly has been a struggle for this team to begin the season. They are under a new coaching regime, and I do like the fact that they brought in the interim coach from Manhattan to be able to help things out, and that's a big reason why they did bring in someone that I think is going to be an impact guy in Elijah Buchanan, who he began his career over at Manhattan now, has dealt with injury issues all throughout his career, and looks like he's dealing with injury issues once again as he missed the team's last game, as he, when he was out there on the floor last season for Manhattan, was logging about 11 points, a pair of assists, 5 boards, shooting north of 40% from 3-point range, but even without him, you do have Adam Hess. Adam Hess was able to emerge towards the back half of the season last year, shooting north of 40% from three, shooting north of 40% from distance again, with a little bit over 11 points per contest. NJIT currently really lacking anything down low. They're probably going to be looking to Gajel de Goff, the gentleman from the Netherlands, to be able to step up. He's been able to give you about 4 rebounds per game. Levi Lall has come in as a true freshman and has been able to give you a few rebounds as well. And then for Delaware State, they don't necessarily have a ton of rebounding as well. You've got Brandon Stone, who does stand right around about 6'11" or so, but he doesn't necessarily grab a lot of rebounds. He tries to shoot a lot of threes. They bring in Alston Andrews, who is over at Illinois State, as a 6'10" gentleman over at Illinois State. Just could not get out there on the floor. Last few seasons, he's been their top rebounder thus far this season. And for Delaware State, what has been very surprising has been the slow start to the season for Martez Robinson, who season ago was able to give about 12 points, 5.5 boards, under 3 assists, steal and a half per contest. This season, he has had 10 points or fewer in 3 out of his 4 games. He has been just very inconsistent in general with regards to his production, though he is shooting 60% from 3-point range. Should be seeing a little bit of drop there for a Delaware State team that overall shooting 24% from the outside, 17 turnovers per game. This is going to be a sloppy game, but bringing in Sebastian Robinson to be able to help run the offense, I think has been good for NJIT, and I do think that with NJIT, they've got the better backcourt, and that'll be able to mask a lot of their deficiencies in terms of size. So I did set my total at 141. Both of these teams have been quite sloppy, to say the least, on the offensive side of things, especially with Delaware State's turnovers. So going to be diving in on the under, and with NJIT, want to lay up to 4.5 with them. 306-609, 306-610. Bethune-Cookman is going to be playing us to Charleston Southern. Charleston Southern is an underdog of between 3 and 3.5 points, and your total is anywhere between 142.5 and 143.5. I set Bethune-Cookman as a 3.5 point favorite. So here at a 3, I'm going to be willing to lay the number with Bethune-Cookman. I just flat out think that you've got better athletes and you've got overall better ability on this team. You've got Zion Harmon, a former top 200 recruit who's been able to do a nice job of being able to help out in the backcourt with about 17 points, 3 assists, pair of steals per contest. And it's a Bethune-Cookman team that, I'm not even kidding here, through 3 games, they have been able to completely light it up with a grand total of 59 steals, with Damani McIntyre averaging 6.3 steals, 6 points, 5.7 rebounds, and 4 assists per contest. Now, the context is needed. Bethune-Cookman played against Minnesota to begin the year, and then they played 2 non-D1 teams that could not take care of the ball. So I do think that that is going to be tapering off a little bit. Meanwhile, you've got for Charleston Southern a team that has put up 94 plus in 2 out of their 4 games. Both of those were against non-D1 teams, and when they have played D1 teams, both of these teams, they have had their struggles. So you've got Tajay Kelly down low for Charleston Southern. So able to give you 15 points, 7.5 boards, and I do like his overall game for Charleston Southern. They do get loose with the ball, though. 14 turnovers per game. That's a little bit of a concern. You've got DJ Patrick, who comes in after being a little bit of an afterthought for South Florida. He's been able to give you double figures. RJ Johnson is really your main man. Season ago was able to supply 7.5 points per contest on 31% three-point shooting. He's currently shooting 58% from three-point range. We should be seeing that taper off a little bit, but for Bethune-Cookman, I do think you've got plenty of weapons out there in the backcourt, and I do think that being able to get about 7.5 rebounds out of Elijah Holtsewe, hopefully I said that correctly, the 7-footer a season ago, was able to give the team a few starts, had a tough time staying out there on the floor due to injuries, but I think that his coming of age big for this Bethune-Cookman team. I'm willing to lay up to 3 with Bethune-Cookman, and with this total, I did set it out at 147.5. Bethune-Cookman feels like they're looking to run it and gun it, and I do think that we are going to be getting a pretty up-tempo game. So, going to be taking a look at the over, and I'm going to be taking a look at Bethune-Cookman, willing to lay up to 3. 306-611, 306-612. You've got Campbell, and they are going to be playing us at NC Central. NC Central is a underdog of between 3.5 and 4 points, and totals between 123.5 and 124, and I did set my total at 132.5. I'm going to be going in on the over. Neither of these defenses are necessarily supreme this year. They're just a pair of teams that happen to be playing a little bit more slowly in terms of their tempo, and I do think that for Campbell, losing Josiah Lucane along J. Powell really hurt this team, as they only have one player that's able to give you north of 4.5 rebounds per game, Anthony De La Rosa, who has been Mr. Do It All, 6'6" combo player who's been able to shoot about 45.5% from 3. Last year had 12.5 points, 6 boards per contest. He's been able to elevate that to more like 18 points and 7 boards thus far this season, but you have a Campbell team that's currently shooting 26% from 3. They aren't this bad of a 3-point shooting team. I'm not going to go out here and say that they're anything amazing or anything like that, but we should be seeing this go northward a little bit. I do think that Jason Seni, who was a relatively solid 33% three-point shooter, who was relatively glued to the bench a season ago, should be able to give this Campbell backcourt a little bit of a jolt start as well. And then for NC Central, you lose so much of those guys that were critical from a season ago. Eric Boone was able to do a good job of being able to generate some steals. Brendan Medley-Bacon was tremendous down low. Justin Wright was Mr. Wright, being able to log 16 points at over 40% three-point shooting. So it has been a little bit of a tough transition for them with NC Central. They have done a nice job taking care of the ball. Only about 10.5 turnovers per contest, but they're only shooting about 32.5% from three-point range. You've had Pooh Boy King along with Jadarius Harris combined to shoot about 43% from three-point range. Between the two of them, 29.8 points per game. It's all about what you're able to get out of everyone else. Emmanuel Izabooner comes in from the Big South. He's been able to give you about 6 rebounds per game. Gotten about 7 points per contest out of Perry Smith, who began his career over at Vermont. So you do have some talented transfers that are in the fold. I do think that Evan Gordon, who we remember from Mississippi Valley State being a double-figure scorer a few seasons ago and being a relatively solid three-point shooter, can really elevate this NC Central team. I mean, with both of these teams, they're not really playing super-duper up-tempo, and Campbell has always been a relatively slow-tempo team. They're a bunch has yet to be able to break the 63-point plateau. I think that they're going to be able to do so here against NC Central, as I do think that NC Central, just a little bit of a work in progress in general, and Campbell does still have quite a bit of chemistry from a season ago, and probably the best player out there on the floor in De La Rosa. So did set my total 132.5 going over, and with Campbell, wanted to lay up to 4 with them. 306-613, 306-614. Bucknell is playing OSU Southern Indiana. Southern Indiana is an underdog between 3 and 3.5 points, and your total is between 140.5 and 141. And with Bucknell, I did set them as a favorite of 5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay this number with Southern Indiana. They were such a good three-point shooting team a season ago, and all those guys are now gone. That is far from terrific, and they have to go up against a Bucknell team that has a 7-footer, Noah Williamson, that's able to do a very nice job down low. He's been able to log 10.5 points, 6.8 boards per contest. Not necessarily too much of a shot blocker, but for Southern Indiana, they're trying to mix and match down low. They bring in someone like a Kyron Powell, who began his career at Houston, but never got out there on the floor. You've also got the transfer from UConn in Urin Hassan, who, I mean, the fact that you say transfer from UConn, that sounds great, but he's very much an afterthought for this team. It has really been the 13 points and 9 boards per contest of A.J. Smith that has been carrying the day for this team. They bring in the top scorer from Florida A&M and Jordan Tillman, but you tell that the three-point shooting that they had a season ago, just gone. They're shooting 29% from three after a season ago. They shot 37.5% from three-point range, losing pretty much each other top 5 scorers from a season ago. You actually lost each of your top 6 from a season ago, as their top returning scorer, Jeremiah Hernandez, season ago shot 41% from 3, but only about 5 points per contest. Meanwhile, on the flip side, you've got Jack Forrest, who's been able to give you 17 points per game. He's able to shoot it well from three-point range. Josh Bosco, who was a bit more of a reserve a season ago for Bucknell, he's become their main facilitator, being able to do a great job with 4.8 assists to about 2.5 turnovers per game. Bucknell has this team outgunned with regards to size. Alvin Edmonds is able to shoot it well from 3, has had a little bit of a rough go of it thus far, shooting about 29% from three-point range, but I do think that as you're able to get a little bit more out of someone like a Pip Ajay, who comes in from the non-Division I level over at Maryhurst, you're going to be able to get more and more out of this Bucknell team, especially from the backcourt. Did set my total at 137, just not the same Southern Indiana team from a season ago that was lighting it up from three-point range, so going to be going in on the under, and with this Bucknell team, I'm going to lay the number, made them a 5-point favorite. 306-615, 306-616. You've got Southeast Missouri State playing against Central Arkansas. Central Arkansas is a 3 to a 3.5 point underdog. Your total on this game is anywhere between 151 and 151.5. I did set my total at a 157, so I'm going to be taking a look at the over. Central Arkansas has just throughout time been one of the fastest teams in all of college basketball, and for Central Arkansas, I think that their defense might be even worse now than it typically is, because Cameron Hunter, their top scorer, but also one of their main just overall glue guys on defense, is currently out of the fold. Meanwhile, you've got a Southeast Missouri team that they lose a lot of their top pieces that was able to lead them to the NCAA tournament a season ago as well. So that has caused their defense to be a little bit all over the place, and their offense certainly is a little bit of a work in progress, but I like what they've been able to get out of Adam Larson, who's been able to log about 10.5 points per contest a season ago, shot in the neighborhood about 38% from three-point range as a 6'9" do-it-all sort of player. Meanwhile, on the flip side for Central Arkansas, you still been able to get good scoring out of Elias Cato. Cato logging 15 points, 7 boards, currently shooting 42.5% from 3. A season ago, he shot below 25% from distance. I do think that that's going to dry up on both fronts. And then you've got Johannes Caspero, who's been able to give you about 4.5 assists per game for Central Arkansas, but Rob Martin has been able to do a nice job coming in from Indiana State, and he's been able to dole out right around 3.5 assists per game for the Southeast Missouri State team. Southeast Missouri State clearly not the offense that they were a season ago. They have yet to break the 70-point plateau, but their defense has been all sorts of wretched, giving up north of 75 points in all 3 of their games thus far this season. For Central Arkansas, you can tell that they're a team very much in transition, as well as they've actually been able to get a little bit of rebounding out of Unga Basis Etam, who has been able to give you about 9.5 rebounds per game, but I do think that for Southeast Missouri State, being able to get down low, some relatively good production with the return of Kobe Clark, who missed the back half of the season. He, a season ago, had 8+ rebounds per game. Having Josh Early coming in after he began his career at Tulsa was a pretty good reserve for the team with 7.5 points, 5 boards a season ago. Going to be enough for Southeast Missouri State to be able to get it done, and I do think that Central Arkansas, a team that just year in and year out is towards the top of college basketball in terms of turnovers, that is going to be very costly for them as well. So this is a spot where I set Southeast Missouri State as a 7-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number and did set my total at a 157, so going over as well. 306, 617, 306, 618. You've got Oklahoma State playing us to New Orleans. New Orleans is a underdog of 12.5 points, seeing a straight 13 out there as well. 143 to 143.5 is your total. And with New Orleans, I did set them as underdogs of 15 points. I'm going to be willing to lay with Oklahoma State. Very off-putting what we saw out in New York from Oklahoma State a few days ago, but I do think that things are going to be reined in a little bit with them. Mike Boynton, I think, is being exposed a little bit as a coach, but I do think the big key for them, just taking away Justin Johnson. Justin Johnson, he, a season ago over at New Orleans, shot over 48% from three-point range, just absolutely lit the world on fire with about 18 points per contest. I think that there's going to be a little bit of a fall-off with that overall efficiency this season, though. I do think that he is going to have the ball in his hands quite a bit, and he's going to be able to find more of his open teammates in general, because he, a season ago, had about 4 assists, 1.3 steals per contest. He's already up right around 5.3 assists per game thus far this season, but the question is, who's going to be able to help him out in the backcourt? You don't have a single other player that's averaging a double-figure amount of points per game. Been able to have Carlos Hart, the non-Division I transfer, come in as a 6'6" combo player, be able to log about 8 points per game, and I do like James Glisson III. Glisson III was over at Mercer a season ago, where he only had 5.5 points per contest while dealing with injuries 2 seasons ago when fully healthy, more like 10.5 points, 5 boards per contest. Meanwhile, for this Oklahoma State team, they should be able to control the glass. You've got Mike Marsh, who comes in from Jacksonville, giving you 6+ rebounds per game. And then Javon Small, talk about a safety sufferer over at East Carolina a season ago, had 16 points, 5 boards, 5.5 assists, and he's doing a lot of the same things over at Oklahoma State this season. Currently shooting 47% for 3. Should see a bit of a drop there, but you do have just overall the big size advantage for Oklahoma State. You've also got someone in Bryce Thompson, who at 6'8", has been able to bury about 50% of his threes as well. And with New Orleans, this team has actually the top over rate since they joined the Division I college basketball betting board to begin the 2018-19 season. And I do think that you get a pretty frenetic, up-tempo game in which you're going to see Oklahoma State be able to bury some open shots. At my total 149 going over, and with Oklahoma State willing to lay up to 14.5 with them. 306, 619, 306, 620. Florida A&M playing us Oregon. Oregon is a favorite of 21 points. Your total is 144.5. Not often you see Oregon hit the road like this, but I did set Oregon as a 22.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it. They've been dealing with the injuries to N'Faly Dante to begin the season, so that is very much accounted for. Even if you do get some form of N'Faly Dante in this game, I don't think you're going to be seeing very much, and I don't think that Oregon would want to risk him in this sort of game. But you've had Nate Biddle do a tremendous job as a stretch 7-footer. He's able to pop some threes, giving you 13 points, 6 boards, a little bit over a block per contest. And then on the Oregon backcourt, you've got a pair of guys in Jermaine Cuisinart along Keyshawn Bartholomew, combined for 23 points per game. Oregon as a whole shot 38% for 3, 57.5% the free throw line. I think that should see that 3-point shooting percentage drop, the free throw shooting increase, but they've been quite efficient with it. Even though they've been a little bit more up-tempo, they've only been turning the ball over about 8.5 times per game. You've got Kawam Evans Jr., better known as KJ Evans, who's been able to do a good job being able to pull in there some rebounds. And Florida A&M just is not going to have any response whatsoever. Florida A&M, very rough out there in the backcourt. Now, Love Betts, in his first game out there, was able to give this team 24 points. That was against Florida, and we shall see what he's able to do moving forward, because he could be a little bit of a difference maker. Comes in from North Carolina A&T, but you need a little bit more out of Jordan Chapman, who he was really the guy for this team a season ago with about 5.5 points, 4 boards, rose up during conference play, and right now he has not been able to do anything for this bunch. You really don't have a lot of rebounding. Chase Bars was someone that was able to give the team right around 4 to 5 rebounds per game a season ago, but they're just, Florida A&M, not able to bring in some top-flight talent. They're currently shooting 25% from 3, 36% from the floor. Florida A&M actually not the world's worst defensive team, but on offense, just absolutely brutal, and I think that this is a spot where just Florida A&M not going to be able to do their part on this total, even if you don't have Infali Dante out there on the floor. So, did set my total at a 140.5, diving in on the under end with Oregon. Wanted to lay up to 22 with them on the road. 306-621, 306-622. It is Stonehill, and they hit the road to face off against Texas A&M Commerce. Commerce is a favorite of between 9.5 to 10.5 points here. Total standing between 138 and 139.5. And with Commerce, I did set them as a favorite of 5.5 points. So I'm going to be willing to take those points. With Stonehill, I do think that you're going to be able to have Max Zagorowski do a very solid job with his versatility at 6'8". A season ago, he was able to shoot 40+% from 3-point range, and I think that he holds it down against a Texas A&M Commerce team that they were able to do a nice job busting out with a win against St. Joe's. I feel like they were very much the beneficiaries of St. Joe's just being as cold as an igloo in general, as they went 6 of 30 from 3-point range. Part of that is good defense, but part of that is being in the right place at the right time. Now with Commerce, you've had James Weathers come in from Bradley, and he's been able to make a nice impact. A season ago over at Bradley, was only able to log about 1.6 points per contest. He's been able to give the team just at the very least a semblance of a backcourt, being able to give out 2.5 assists per contest, being able to settle things down on that front. And then you've had a nice main scorer in Jerome Brewer Jr. has been able to log about 12 points, 5 boards. It's a Commerce team that has a tough time on the glass, but he's been able to do a little bit of a better job of helping out with that. Stonehill, they are very much breadth of size themselves, with Zagorowski, who I mentioned before, leading the team with 4.5 rebounds per game, but I do think that you should be able to get a bit more moving forward out of Shane Dell. Dell is someone that was missing all throughout last season, comes in from the non-Division I level, and as far as being able to log about 3.5 rebounds per game. And then the VMI transfer, Tony Felder, I think is a big key for Stonehill moving forward as well. Was a starter at VMI with 10.5 points, 34% three-point shooting a season ago, and thus far this season has been able to give you about 3.5 assists per game. So he does give Stonehill that reliable go-to just facilitator. At Peno Paulo Adivas, who was over at Hartford, where he was able to log about 6 rebounds per game, should be able to do a solid job of keeping Stonehill lively on the glass. So it is a spot where I did set my line at a 5.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Stonehill, and with the total set mine at a 137.5. I do think that both of these teams can have a tough time being able to find the bottom of the basket, so diving in on the under and going to be taking the points with Stonehill. 306-623, 306-624. You've got Hou Christian playing OC UTSA. Meet for the San Antonio Roadrunners, who are between 5.5 and 6.5 point road favorites. Total is between 163 and 163.5. Did set my total at a 158. I'm going to be looking at the under. You got a Hou Christian team that, without question, they are looking to push tempo. They are playing super duper up tempo and fast, but at the same time, you don't necessarily have the most efficient offense in the world going up against a San Antonio team that they themselves have their offensive deficiencies, I think is the best way of being able to put it, with this UTSA team. They are probably a bottom 100 team in all of college basketball, with Adante Holloman being able to give you 13 points per contest. He's been able to give this team a little bit of a nice boost after season ago. He spent it at UT Rio Grande Valley as a part-time starter. Did shoot 43.5% from 3-point range with 3 assists per game, so might be a little bit of untapped potential there. And for UTSA, they're really looking to go down low a whole heck of a lot more. You've got a trio of guys in Trey Edmonds, Trey Fuller, Colton Lingard, who've all been able to give you between 7 and 7.5 rebounds per game. And you've gotten 5.5 boards per contest out of Chandler Cuthrell as well. So this team, they're really built around playing in the post. They don't necessarily have a ton in their backcourt. Been able to get about 10.5 points per game out of Christian Tucker, who has been a little bit of a reserve for this team throughout the last few seasons, but his career about 23% three-point shooter. Trey Fuller is a stat sheet suffer that, again, doesn't necessarily shoot it well from 3-point range. And then for Hou Christian, you don't have necessarily a lot down low. Bunke Morang, he's been able to give you about 6.5 rebounds per game thus far this season, but They're looking in the backcourt for Pierce Basil, who last year shot in the mid-30s from three-point range and 8.5 points per game to really be able to ascend. They don't necessarily have a ton of facilitation either, with Basil giving out 3.5 assists per game, but 20.5 turnovers per contest. That is very, very unsightly. Gotten a double-figure amount of points out of Marcus Green, who comes in from Sacramento St, but really for Hou Christian, it's a rough ordeal for them with this UTSA team. Not like they're necessarily going to be able to take the world's greatest advantage of the lack of backcourt talent they've got for Hou Christian, and I just flat out think that Hou Christian doesn't hold up their end of the bargain. I set my number right in between the 5.5 and the 6 at 6, so in terms of what I'm looking at right now, I personally would rather lay 5.5 with UTSA rather than take 6.5 with Hou Christian, just because I think that the level and talent in general is higher on UTSA. So going to be taking a look at the Roadrunners. And when it comes to the total, I did set mine at a 158. So I'm going to be taking a look at the under and going to be taking a look at the Roadrunners. Meet me for them. 306-625, 306-626. Tulsa plays those to South Carolina State. South Carolina State is a underdog of 15.5 points. Between 148.5 and 149.5 is your total. I did set this at a 146.5 total, so I'm going to be taking a look at the under with South Carolina State. I think that this team is really going to have their difficulties just being able to find ways to be able to put the ball in the basket with losing the likes of Lusan Holmes and company. And for Tulsa, they are trying to play a little bit more defense than a season ago. Tulsa just had one of the most nightmarish years ever last year, where they covered literally 4 spreads the entirety of the season. And hey, for Tulsa, I believe that they've already covered 2 spreads this season, so it's going well for them. Eric Conkle has gone back to his Louisiana Tech roots, bringing Kobe Williams, who's been able to log 16 points per contest, was one of the top scorers over with Louisiana Tech a season ago. He also did bring in a good sharp shooter in Keston Willis as well, but he has yet to get out there on the floor and probably not going to be able to play in this one. And then Wabakita is a little bit of an upside guy that comes in from St. John's, a true 7'1" gentleman with good athleticism. Just was not able to get out there last season due to being out of sorts with regards to the coaching staff and injuries as well. And then Isaiah Barnes has really been a breakout guy as well. Someone who began his career at Michigan. Michigan wouldn't give him minutes, so he heads on over to Tulsa, 13 points, 7 boards per game. But I do think that this number has gotten a little bit too demonstrative, because while South Carolina State has darn near nothing in the backcourt, down low, you do have someone that should be able to do a good job down low, Davion Everett, who's been able to give you 9 boards, a steal, a half a block per contest, like what he's able to bring to the table. You've got one guy that's right now shooting from 3-point range for South Carolina State, Omar Croxley, who's been able to log 13 points. Has been able to chip in there a little bit on the defensive side of things as well. 2.5 steals, shooting 37.5% from 3-point range. Now, South Carolina State had a tough time taking care of the ball last year. This season, much of the same, nearly 17 turnovers per game, and you really don't have a lot outside of Croxley, along with Mitchell Taylor in terms of scoring. Taylor is coming as a true freshman with about 12 points per contest, but you do have a team that is looking to play a little bit more defensively. They've gotten a little bit more down low as they've brought in some size, so I do think that that's going to be slowing things down a little bit in this one. As a result, made my total a 146.5. I'm going to be taking a look at the under, and when it comes to South Carolina State, we'll take 15 or more with them. 306-627, 306-628. Santa Clara is going to be playing us to Mississippi Valley State. Mississippi Valley State, an underdog of between 26.5 and 27 points. Your total on this game is 142.5 with Santa Clara. I set them as a 28-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number with Santa Clara. They have just so much size for Mississippi Valley State to try to match up with. Christoph Tilley, he was really the hero for the team over the weekend when they had a very, very nip-and-tuck game against Southeast Louisiana. Bailed them out with a double-double for Santa Clara. You do have good versatility with someone like Johnny O'Neal, who comes in from American, and he at 6'10" is able to bury some threes at American last season, 13-plus points per contest. And then Carlos Marshall along with Jalen Benjamin, very solid in the backcourt. Benjamin has been slow to get going. He's taken a little bit more of a passive approach after season ago at Mount St. Mary's at 16 points, shot 37% from 3, only logging about 7 points per contest. But you got someone at 6'7" at Dama Ball, who's just a good shooter in general, career 40% 3-point shooter. Carlos Marshall was the primary scorer over at Tennessee State, and got a Mississippi Valley State team that has Raekwon Brown, who's been able to do a nice job with 16.5 points, 5.5 boards per contest, but past that, really not a lot around them. The rebounding for the team is rough, as Brown is leading the way with that regard. You don't have a single player on Mississippi State that's giving you more than 2 assists per contest. You could just really use something out of someone like Areco Gibson. Gibson a season ago was a part-time starter, was limited to just 14 games due to injury, but he only put up 4.5 points, 3.5 boards when he was given the minutes last season. Hasn't really built upon those this season. Donovan Sanders comes in from the non-Division I level. He's been able to log about 10 points per game, but he's not able to pop threes either for a Mississippi Valley State team that's turning the ball over 17 times per game. They don't even play super-duper up-tempo. They are completely outgunned on the glass, so I do think that Santa Clara going to be able to take it to Mississippi Valley State, and I do think that for Santa Clara, they are going to dial it back a little bit more this season, but still play relatively up-tempo. They've scored 77 plus in 3 out of their 4 games, and Mississippi Valley State has given up at least 82 points in all 4 of their contests. So semi-total 148 going over and willing to lay with Santa Clara, made them a 28-point favorite, and we wrap things up with 306, 629, 306, 630. San Diego plays us in Navy. Navy is a underdog of 7 points with your total between 134.5 and 135.5. With Navy, I did set them as an underdog of 5.5 points. I'm going to be willing to take the points. You've got a San Diego team that does have a lot of new pieces from a season ago. They lose pretty much 5 out of their top 6 scores from a season ago. So Wayne McKinney III has really had to become the main ball handler for this team, shooting 43% from 3 and has been able to give you 15.5 points, 3.5 assists per contest. You just don't necessarily have a ton down low for this team. You've had Kevin Patton Jr. step up with about 8 rebounds per game as a true freshman, which has been a nice surprise for this team, but he's the only guy on the roster giving you north of 4.8 rebounds per game. PJ Hayes has come in and he's been able to give you mid-30s 3-point shooting. And overall, San Diego is shooting 36% from 3. They also turn the ball over 14.5 times per game, and it's very clear what Navy's looking to do. They're looking to play sloppy to try to hang in these games. They have yet to break the 70-point plateau this season. They don't have a single guy averaging more than 9.7 points per contest, but do have someone like an Austin Ainge who's been able to give you 6.5 points per contest, has a little bit of a track record of success. You've had Mac McDonald give you 4.5 points, 4.5 boards. He's been a nice versatile player in the backcourt, and then you've also been able to get some relatively good offensive numbers out of Austin Benjini as well, who was back from a season ago where he had more like 5 points, 2.5 assists, can be a little bit of a facilitator for a Navy team that they haven't found their identity on offense quite yet. On defense, they've been able to do a relatively solid job of just scratch and claw. They don't generate a lot of steals, but they play really tough man-to-man defense. I do think that for San Diego, they are going to be having their issues defensively as well. San Diego last season, one of the worst teams in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, so it is a good old situation of something's got to give. As a result, I did set my total at a 135.5 here at a 134.5. Going to be taking a look at the over. And with San Diego, only can make them a 5.5 point favorite, so going to be taking a look at the points as well. And that will wrap things up for the Monday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the V SMU family of podcasts. A big thanks to Mike Cutri, who does great work over at FTN Bets. He joined me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of 2 ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at unit_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM. Name does not matter. As per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is via an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Coming at you guys every single day throughout the college basketball season. That means I'm coming at you once again tomorrow. Thank you so much for tuning in.
For the ones who get it done, the most important part is the one you need now. And the best partner is the one who can deliver. That's why millions of maintenance and repair pros trust Grainger, because we have professional-grade supplies for every industry, even hard-to-find products. And we have same-day pickup and next-day delivery on most orders. But most importantly, we have an unwavering commitment to help keep you up and running. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.